Nei, I tēnei wā. I mihi mai ana kia koutou, kia mātou hui tuatahi o te tau, so it's the first meeting for this year for Te Maru o Kaituna. I'll just open up with a bit of a prayer and then we'll get into the business. Unuhia, ko te pau mo, ko te pau ruta, ko te pau whakaurahanga ki te tōnga, te maru rangi te tāui, kōkeri ki te mate me hoki ki te ora. Ki mihia. Whanno, haramai te toki, haumi e hui e, tāiki e. Kia ora tātou, so good morning members and staff. I welcome you to this meeting for Te Maru o Kaituna, the River Authority Forum meeting. Just a reminder to members and staff that this meeting is being recorded, or video recorded, and will be available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website. Members who are zooming in, can you please keep your cameras turned on, raise your virtual hand, and if you wish to speak, and keep your microphones on mute when not speaking. Mihi mai ana kia tate. Right, we'll get right into it because we've got a pretty busy agenda today. Got a few presentations to get through as well. So first on is apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Lani Kiriopa, Councillor Nees, Erin Thompson, Karina Bird, Mokoera Te Amo, and Commissioner Wosley will depart early and then come back again later. Okay. Can I have somebody move those, please? Thank you. Second. Thank you. Number 2 on the agenda, public forum. There is no public forum. Number 3, items not on the agenda. There are not any. Order of business. There's no change to the order of business. Declaration of conflict of interest. There's the call. Any conflicts of interest? Sorry, Grant.
I've got a bit of a conflict with the presentation that Jackson Efford is putting forward today.
Thank you, Grant. Any others? No. We'll move on to the minutes. These are the minutes of the previous meeting. That's Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority minutes for 19th of August last year, 2022. So I'll take those minutes as read. Are there any matters arising or corrections to the minutes? No? Okay, can I have a mover and second, and preferably somebody who was there? So I was at that meeting, so I will move those as correct. And can I have a seconder? Second. You were there. Thank you, Bill. Second by Bill. Okay, so the recommendation, we confirm that the Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority minutes are a true and correct record. Very good. Thank you very much. Ka huri no, that's us for now. Ka huri no te rākau ki a koe, Peter. So you're going to be up first, our first presentation, and Peter is talking to us around the construction of a habitat for our Ikawai translocation of the giant kukupu. Technical difficulties. Anyone want to sing a song while we wait? No?
It's hard enough making technology work when no one's watching, but when you've got a whole committee looking at you, it's probably impossible. So we will feel for you at the moment, Peter.
Kia ora, Piki.
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. I just wondered where in the agenda we're going to talk about the appointment of the Deputy Chair.
That is a little bit later on. So we're going to do 2 presentations and then we'll jump into the membership and then the election of a deputy chair.
Tēnā koe. Thank you.
10:15, Piki.
Ka pai. Thank you.
Do you have a nomination? We're good.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So nothing happening.
Where's the Zoom link?
No idea.
No idea. Okay. Have you got it on here?
No,
No. Okay. All right. Let's just say
just that this didn't.
What's that?
This didn't actually move anything.
Isn't it?
So
Okay. All right. Yep. We're not connected on Zoom here at the moment, so what I might do is just bring my computer over, save it to a USB stick, and share it from my computer.
doesn't work.
Are we?
It doesn't work. No, I've already tried it because none of the video plays.
Okay.
So, but it just showed it was connected in, so why not? I don't think so, because I've tried to download it to a stick and none of the video plays. And so I'm guessing that, well, it does, because I've emailed it Jenny as well, and it doesn't either. Yeah.
Okay.
So we must be able to connect it in this, mustn't we? Because see it.
Have you got your?
It shows.
Have you got the Zoom link for this meeting?
Well, yeah, that's what Jenny and I just put in.
Yeah,
I presume. So that's how we're there.
Oh, no, that's the internet connection.
Right.
So if we.
Just to give a bit of time to get the presentation moving, I'm just wondering whether we move to the reports number 9 in the agenda, whilst Pin's helping Peter to get the presentation ready. We don't have Raguru I'll ring you to business parks here. Do you mind if we do a bit of business and then we'll, yeah, okay. So just the reports at number 9, which is change in membership. Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority. So you'll have that in your package. The recommendations in that package is 1, receives the report, change of membership to Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority. 2, notes that the appointments of Councillor Matimuana McDonald as the appointed member of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Councillor Te Taru White as the alternate member, and Councillor Jane Nees as the informal member. Point 3, notes that the appointments of Mr. Nick Chara for the Lakes Community Board as the appointed member for the Rotorua Lakes Council, and Councillor Lani Kiriopa as the alternate member. Point 4, notes that the appointment of Councillor Andy Witches as the appointed member for the Western Bay Plenty District Council, and Councillor Grant Daly as the alternate member. Point 5, notes that the appointments of Commissioner Shad Rolleston as the appointed member for Tauranga City Council, and Commissioner Bill Wosley as the alternate member. Point 6, notes that the reappointment of Piki Thomas as the appointed member of the Pumautanga o Te Arawa Trust, and Rawiri Kingi as the alternate member. And point 7, notes that reappointment of Nikki Douglas as the appointed member of Te Tahu o Tawake Heimua Trust. So I just want to move it for those memberships. And the seconder, Grant, all around the table introduction. So I think
Carried.
so those are all in favour. Okay, carried. Maru.
A couple of points of clarification.
Yep.
It doesn't appear that Waitaha has a representation. And I have to remind you that the Waitaha settlement claim is preempted this settlement, the Maru o Kaituna. And if you go through the details of their settlement, you would find they should have had their own autonomy. That's the first point. The second point is Ngāti Whakaue's position there is there at this point in time until their treaty settlement is resolved. Those 2 key points that need to be there. I think that that matter with Waitaha should be resolved as soon as possible, because as we're going into 3 waters, you would find that much of their legislation will spill into. They would be more of an assistance rather than a hindrance to the Maru o Kaituna.
Maru, thank you for that. In regards to the Waitaha, that is something that the chair of Tapuika and whoever the chair for Waitaha is, they need to have that conversation with the trust boards and then make that decision of who that person is, and then give that name to this board, and then that will give them a seat here. Yeah. For Tapuika, it's Rawiri Bill. I'm not sure who is the chairperson for Waitaha. New chair, okay. So maybe between you and I, we might be able to facilitate that between the 2 iwi and get the chairs together at least, and then the trustees can have that discussion around who that appointment might be. Because, yeah, I totally agree. Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Well, it's your Waitaha side I'm pulling on. Okay. move on to the next point, which is 9.2, appointment of Te Maru Kaituna River Authority Deputy Chair. So suggested recommendations. So I'm just going to ask, are there any recommendations for the Deputy Chair position? Oh, sorry, I've got to sort the system out first. So the recommendation, which I need a mover and a seconder for, is Te Maru Kaituna River Authority, 1, receives a report appointment of Te Maru Kaituna River Authority Deputy Chairperson. And 2, resolves to just that one?
We're going to do it in parts.
Okay, sorry, got to do this in parts. So is there a recommendation?
A mover
A mover and seconder
to receive the report.
to receive the report.
I'm happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Vicky, second. Vicky Thompson. And yeah. The second part of this is to resolve which system and will be used for electing the deputy chairperson. System B is the preferred, I'm assuming here. Then we need to pass that as well. Okay, can I have a mover for the adoption of system B?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
I'll move. Okay. And seconder, Nikki. Thank you, Nikki. Te Tari, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question really was to the earlier points around alternate and informal members. What is their attendance? Who can vote in that particular space? Who can? That's my question really. What's the authority of each of those two particular positions, informal and alternate?
Do we have an answer for that?
Yes, the alternates can. The informals can't. Sorry? The alternates can vote if they're present, but the informal members can't.
The informal members.
Oh, yeah. No, not for the chairperson, not for the deputy chairperson.
So
It's
the
just-
primary.
Yeah.
Do you want to answer this, Pim?
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor White. My understanding is that the alternate member has voting rights if the primary member's not present, and the informal members don't have voting rights under the terms of the Act. So once the Ngāti Whakaue settlement occurs, the member for Ngāti Whakaue and the informal member for regional council, they will become formal members and have voting rights. So it's my understanding of how the legislation works. We did try and see if there was, Joe's giving me the thumbs up from the back row. Thank you, Joe. We did see whether there were legal avenues to speed that process up, but that's what the legislation spells out pretty clearly. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. But previously I was an informal member, and I raised the same question. It indicate that the indications were I could vote, but I could not be part of counting for a quorum. So it's a bit confusing. Maybe I've just got that wrong in the way it was practiced previously.
For you, Chair.
Yeah.
Councillor White, that is correct. As an informal member, under normal circumstances, you would not count towards the quorum, but we are under emergency management legislation at the moment, which was similar to the COVID legislation that allows for Zoom participants to count towards the quorum. So as an informal member, you do not count towards the quorum, but you are able to vote.
Okay, that seems to contradict what Pim has just said, I think. Sorry, can't hear.
Yeah. So to clarify, informal members do not count towards the quorum, but are able to vote.
Okay, that's clear.
Yeah.
And the alternate members cannot vote if, in fact, the official member is present, right?
I would coin that as one vote from each representative. So
Okay.
whether that's, yeah.
That's fine.
Can I make a comment? Ngāti Whakaue hasn't got an act of decree in terms of this settlement. They won't have an act of decree until they finalise their settlement. So as a consequence, they won't have that voting right. But our discussions could be leading up to confirming and consolidating the treaty settlement. So we're like that.
Just a little bit on that. I think when this board, when Te Maru o Kaituna agreed for Ngāti Whakaue with the Ngāti Whakaue's agreements that they be part of this, it's because of the work that we're doing in the area, and so we didn't want to leave Ngāti Whakaue out of the discussions. They had to be part of the discussions because it's the whenua there and the river, etc., and it's all that that tribal thing. So I think in regards to the discussions around what happens on the river, it's valid. What we're now going through is the chair, who is the deputy chair for this entity, with the idea that we continue to include all our whānau within the river catchment and the wider Taurawa area. So I think let's go from there. I think this next part here is now asking for nominations for the deputy chairpersonship. Do you have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Te Taru White, Councillor White. I guess I need to clarify, is there an issue in that?
I can kind of partially confirm that I had a talk with Te Taru yesterday, and he's kind of declined if it comes up, so mainly due to his workload, etc., those sorts of things. So Te Taru, if that's correct, if you could give an indication that I'm speaking truth.
I could say it was hearsay. But hey, look, no, that was correct conversation. I have a busy workload, but the other question too is, and I'm alternate, and therefore, what's the validity of an alternate standing as well or be nominated? It's those sorts of questions that need to be answered because the primary member is there, and I'm an alternate. So is that an issue? Can't hear.
I think it's an issue. I'm looking for an indicator from Joe, but I think it may be an issue if we've got a primary and an alternate here.
Yeah, well, to save any confusion, then I will decline any nominations. And thanks for the nomination, Mati Moana. But am I able to re-nominate Mati Moana? Well, I will officially nominate Mati Moana McDonald and decline the invitation. Thank you.
Tautoko.
Aye.
I'm trying to read Mati Moana's face, and it's a face, it's a beautiful face. And so just imihi mai ana kia koe. Mati Moana, she has accepted, I think, she's accepted the position as deputy chair. I think because we fall within the Mauao constituency, it's probably an added thing that we should be represented there as well. But I love the idea of the energies between male and female, male. So I think that's Te Tari's giggling. Yeah, just want to check if there's any other nominations. Is that you, Jeff? Are there any other nominations?
No, not from me. Sorry, Dean. I was just being silly. Responding to your energies between male and female. I like that idea too, but I was motivated by a different reason. Sorry. Carry on.
Move on a second event to declare Matamora as the deputy chair, and then move on a second.
Okay, just to officialise this, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, and that's the appointment of Mati Moana as the Deputy Chairperson of the Maru Kaituna River Authority for a period of 3 years pursuant to Schedule 5, Section 1 of the Tapuika Claims Settlement Act 2014.
Firstly, Mr. Chair, just as a matter of procedure, I'll move nominations closed.
Okay, nominations closed. Nick, seconder. Okay. Maru. Can Maru second? Bine, Ngāti Whakauera. Oh, Vicky, are you raising your hand as second? Vicky Thomas. He mihi mai ana e hene paitunu. Right, we were going to go for a break, but we're not. We're going to go back to Peter. Peter, are we all good? Okay. Kia ora, hand it over to you. Thank you.
Oh, my apologies. So the kaupapa started being focused on the whitebait, and in Kaituna, 90% of our whitebait is inanga, with a few others in there, as you can see. These are the other species in the whitebait run, so that's koaro, giant cockapoo, and banded cockapoo down, short jaw cockapoo down the bottom, banded on the top on the right, and smelt. So starting at the Bora pits, they were formed by stopback construction in the 50s. Charlie Mitchell identified them over 3 years as being a spawning area. And when we were taken there by Kim Young from DOP to show us the spawning site, it was only known as the spawning site then, but as we started doing some mahi around there, we found that in actual fact, inanga were living there all the year round. It was actually used as a bit of rough grazing by the dairy farmer there. And so in 2007, we created an MOU between the landowner and the Makatu Taipori Trust, and fenced off that area, and then started getting rid of the weeds and planting new native habitat. So that's the area that we're talking about there, with the arrow at the top, and the bottom picture is what it looked like when we first arrived there. So we applied to the regional council for some funding from their Environmental Enhancement Fund. They were particularly supportive right from the very start of this. At that stage, you needed a resource consent to put a digger in a wetland, and they gave assistance of one of their staff to make sure we wrote a successful application and waived the fee for the resource consent. So we pressed on into it, trying to make the best use of that little piece of whenua that was outside the stop bank alongside the river. The main focus of it is the water control in and out of the ponds. So the channels are put at half tide level, And so that means that the top half of the tide fills up the ponds up to high tide and then back down to half tide. And then the pond water stays at that level as the river goes down to low and then back up to half and again. So that was a completed project there, and it's sort of making much better use of the land that's available there. As I started on this project, I realised that I needed to learn a lot more about the biology of what was going on around me, and so I enrolled as a graduate diploma. The big issue was, if you dig some holes in a wetland, how long does it take the fish to actually move in there? How much does it have to naturalise and that sort of thing? So did a bit of a bait trial because Kim Young, who'd taken us over there in the first place, had been using cheese as a bait for fish traps for a while. But when I got over there, my tutor, Brendan Hicks, had been using cat biscuits, and another guy who was fishing on the Waikato River was using Vegemite. So I did a trial on all of those, and you can see that cheese is way better than anything else. What's quite interesting is that in actual fact, no bait at all is better than either cat biscuits or Vegemite. As it happened, essentially from the time the ponds were open, they moved in a big way, sort of soaked out of the current habitat and into the new habitat. But you see at the end, they ended up being pretty much evenly occupied on both the new and the old habitat. Got plenty of really good catches, and as you can see there, a bit of everything. What's important to note maybe is the 2011-12 figures. That figure there is the year of the Rena. And so obviously that oil that was in the water from the Rena obviously had quite an impact on the incoming whitebait, whether it held them out longer for the kahawai to eat them all, or whether they just couldn't get through, or whether they died in the oil. We're not too sure about that. But they certainly recovered in a big way the following year. So they certainly seem to turn up in the ponds way more often than in the awa. And so it was really starting to prove the worth of these small off-river ponds. So all sorts of bycatch, parori from about that big up to too big to fit in your fry pan. Some pretty good tuna, that's a decent sized longfin there, along with heaps of short fins. We're guessing there's probably 3 or 4 longfins that live in that area from having caught them in different places without knowing enough about whether in actual fact all of that area is their rohi and they travel around the whole area. But we certainly have caught some quite good ones in a few different areas in there. So obviously, we're having made the new ponds, we ended up with piles of mud everywhere, and so we got in there, had a couple of planting days, which were really well supported, and the bottom photo shows what that area looks like now. Also, because we'd made some small ponds in the process and found that in actual fact a hell of a lot of whitebait had gone into those relatively small ponds, we made a whole lot of more small ponds because there's a long finger of area that goes up from our main pond construction, so we put in what we could fit. What we put in was probably a bit small, but anyway, it was all part of the experiment at the time. Aquatic weed growth is a real big thing. As you can see there, it can clog up the waterways to the stage where there's virtually no room for fish to swim in there. It has to be dealt with, so you can do it the easy way with the regional councils deal with the weed rake. We can give a whole class full of kids a rake on a rope each, and we spend the morning dragging it all out from here, there and everywhere, and they have an absolute ball, including one guy that had to get into the pond to retrieve the rake that had flown off the end of the rope when he biffed it. But anyway, he got in there and got it out. So obviously there's habitat in there. As soon as you're creating that level in there, there's way more species than just the ikawai that use it. you can see that ducks were actually rearing babies before the ground had even settled from the construction. And the kotuku is actually a relatively regular visitor there, and we see it quite often. So ongoing predator control is really important. And as soon as you create a good place for the birds to live as well as the fish, then the predators move in. And it doesn't matter how many you catch, there's still some more move in every year. So that's Charlie Mitchell's original report on the spawning, and you see the red circled area is the area where he found the spawning back then and where it still happens today. So that's exactly that point that he was showing the spawning. And there you can see the milk pouring out into the water there and just parting the rushes, and that showed all of those eggs right there. But this was even more exciting. There's our bunch of small ponds that we put in the available space up to the left there, and that arrow there is pointing to a brand new channel, and we had spawning in it that year. That's that tiny little channel, and you can see all the fish starting to gather on the left-hand photos, and then the milk starting to pour out of the vegetation there on the right. So that's it full on at the main spawning area there. The milk is coming out there incredibly strongly, and there were probably several thousand fish there at that time. So this is it happening this year. This is actually just quite a small activity of spawning, and there were actually 3 or 4 points like this where rather than one big mass happening, there were little bits of spawning happening all over, and there could well have been quite a bit more in areas that we didn't actually notice it. You'll see that gradually there gets to be more and more around there, and the milk just keeps flowing, and then it gradually starts thinning out, but the fish still keep arriving. What seems to happen is the males go in there and start ejecting the milk all right through that vegetation there. And that tall fescue vegetation is really the commonest lot of vegetation where it seems to happen. You'll see a bit of a flutter down the bottom there any second now. There you go. And that's a tuna heading in there for breakfast. And often that's the first sign that it's actually going to take off on the day, because it varies when it does and doesn't over the spring tide. The tuna will turn up and be the main indicator of that it's all on, and you can have anything up to 4 or 5 tuna there breakfasting. I still don't know for sure whether after the fish or the eggs. The eggs are incredibly small, only 1 millimetre in diameter. And the fish are really quite tangled in the vegetation while they're doing all that. So you can't help feeling that it's most likely they're after the fish. But then again, if there's big masses of spawn there, they've only got to scoop up mouthfuls of it for it to be real high protein food. So you can see how much the tuna like the area as much as the inanga do. And those couple of top pictures are obtained just by throwing a handful of cheese granules in there, and they turn up from all over. There's actually 8 eels in the top right-hand picture. You can't actually see them all, but you can see 5 very obviously there. Getting a wee bit more controversial, putting an exotic plant into a wetland, but these golden weeping willow trees actually form are the quickest way to form shade over the water. The more you can shade the water, the more you cool the water, the more oxygen it holds, and it also suppresses the weed in those shady areas. We thought the digger was going to be coming along that section of the riverbank, so that middle photo in the bottom, we carved our willow right back to nothing so the digger could work around it, and then it didn't happen. But the picture on the far right is only 2 seasons later from being chopped down to that in the middle. And then all of these pictures along the edge of the water there of willows, they're all replicated by taking long branches out of the already established trees and using them as poles to start off, and they take off pretty quickly. Floating wetlands is another major additive to the wetland ponds. The top pictures show them being planted out. The top right is 1 month after planting, and the bottom left is that's how much root growth there was in 1 month. And so then the next picture is 6 months and then 12 months. That sort of root mass underneath there and the growth on the plants above is only happening because they are extracting the nutrients out of the water. And we actually transplanted a whole lot out of those floating wetlands originally, and almost every root maps had 1 or 2 or 3 little juvenile eels up to about 6 inches in length. So there's gradually a growing awareness of how important these ponds are of putting back our fish habitat. And so this is Graham Paddy's place. He committed a 3-hectare paddock alongside the Pongakawa River to create some habitat. So we put 24 ponds in that area, all connected to each other and all connected back to the Pongakawa. This is Hamish Henderson's place, a little bit further along from the Pongakawa, but he's now converting most of his drains into a series of ponds in order to create fish habitat. Of course, bringing up the tamariki and rangatahi into knowledge of all this stuff is really important. So we've had a fair few field days for kids coming along to learn about the wetland values. This is our latest project, and it's actually supposed to have a white coming over it. I don't know why it's not. That's a bummer. Sorry?
Is this located?
I'll just stop this for a second because this is, oh, I'm not sure I should have done that. I think. We'll have to do without the whiter. This is the latest project on the corner of the Pongakawa and the Pukahina canals, just above the Waihi estuary. So it's a real shame. I had a particularly good whiter playing over this and probably shouldn't have killed the song. No. So you can see this is very adjacent to the estuary. Anyway, this is the same area, all planted out, ready to go. It's really quite an impressive piece of wetland. This is creating some good connections between, there's 2 connections on each side of this, 2 coming off the Pongakawa and 2 coming off the Pukahina. And because I don't have polarised lens on my camera, you sort of just need to keep a bit of an eye over those couple of white pipes there, and that it gives you a pretty good indication of the inanga and smelt that have actually moved it into those ponds pretty much straight away from when we connected them. There has been a couple of fish surveys done there, but the data from them actually hasn't been made available to me. A little bit of an ongoing issue, but anyway. So if you see the line that comes right down through the middle of that map, there's the corner of the Pongakawa and the Pukahina, and Charlie Mitchell showing those little spotted areas. So that's right on the spawning area where it happened back then. What's going to happen there now is a little bit hard to work out because we've altered the habitat there quite a bit. And so we don't know yet where the spawning's happening there now. Anyway, it's all about, we can take a heap of kai from our level, whether it's a feed of watercress, getting a feed of bait, white bait, catching some ducks. It's mostly about valuing those things and putting something back, which is what these ponds do. So the reality is that we've gotten too good at draining swamps and some of it's got to go back. We're lucky that small ponds can hold a lot of fish. You can see all of those species there have all been found in the ponds on the Kaituna. Rearing habitat is the main thing. It shifts them away from the trout and the kahawai and the awa and puts them into habitat that those fish seem to find too constricted to go into. The weed control, predator control, all of that, we do need to carry on the management of these areas is as important as building them in the first place. So a few acknowledgements there. I won't spend too much time on that other than to give special thanks to the Regional Council who've supported this with a range of land management officers all the way through the process. So, told you that story, so we can start on another one. So, giant cockapoo. They're the largest galaxids. They're declining at a furious rate. They're found on 3 main islands of New Zealand. And they're a coastal lowland fish that prefer the slow lentic waters, which is exactly what we've been creating with these ponds. So while the Bay of Plenty is supposed to have a major population in the area, they're very thin on the ground. You can see that they've only turned up in 4 to 5% of the records of surveys that have been done. So there's some there, but they're pretty thin on the ground. But we have an owl called the kite cockapoo, which means that they used to be regarded as part of the food resources of the area. You'd go pretty hungry trying to live in them these days. We have Ihinga, Notororangi and Hatupatu who are all recorded of having translocated fish. So it's a history that goes back to right since you fellas have been here.
Peter, that's ngā Toroirangi.
So these ponds we've been constructing are just as suitable for giant cockapoo, but they're not turning up since we've been making them. And that seems likely that there's just so few of them there that they aren't producing enough whitebait for them to be actually productive. So Paul Decker from Mahirangi Technical Institute has offered us both whitebait and well-developed juveniles suitable for translocation. He's supplied these to quite a few other places, and they are what they're using to create whitebait in aquaculture. They produced over 5 tonne last year. They're talking about 20 tonne this year. They have an aim of producing over 100 tonne a year long term. So I'm proposing that we accept this offer and do what it takes to actually use this constructed habitat that we've been making to make some initial translocations of these ikiwai. So there's 4 sets of ponds that have been constructed and they've all got environmental programs over them, which includes full support from the Regional Council. Because we already have some, even if it's only a few, we don't need a dock permit, which is only required if there's none there. We need an MPI permit, which is quite a lot easier to get than dock. Dock have not actually got any policy on it at the moment because their old policy has expired and they're still pulling together a new policy, but they based it on that document there, which lists 35 potential risks to translocation of fish. They do say you can either mitigate or eliminate these risks, but in actual fact, a whole lot of their mitigation requires several years of data gathering. And so to a certain degree, DOC seems to be at the moment taking the stance that we've made it too hard for you to comply, so you can't do it. The application for an MPI permit does not require an extensive risk assessment, and it's pretty simple. But taking on board the points that DOC have put forward as far as potential risks, I think we could still very much bear them in mind and also put in the best possible follow-up monitoring to enable adaptive management and learn as much as we can. So Cindy Baker from NIWA is pretty keen. She was involved in releases up north, also from Maru, and Professor Brendan Hicks is part of the original email thread that actually kicked this korero off. So I'm suggesting to you guys that we make this a test case and give it a go.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Very informative. Do we have any patai or questions from any of the members?
Māori customary rights is highly important because of there was the time of the Vikings. These were the Māori Vikings I'm talking about. Those who came from Hawaii, they came with all these knowledges. I would put it this way, here lies stats and sometimes stats tell lies. And what I mean by that is, have you spoken to the fish? Do the fish know their environment? And when you weigh it all up, you would find that eels, for instance, are creatures of habit. They follow a certain pathway and they continue to follow that pathway for centuries. The mullet was very similar to that. So it's about getting back to creating those environments in response to the eels who've been traveling that eels and fish who have been doing that pathway for 1,000 years. And you've got to have knowledge because these happens in seasons. It happens by the moon. It happens by the stars. The fish can read all that. They know all that. And so do some of us. So it's not relying just basically on stats. Some stats, you've actually got to understand the movement of the fish. Now, I have a fair knowledge of that because when they were digging up the whairere and the kaikokupu, they were blowing it up with dynamite. In fact, I got into trouble because I pinched some of the dynamite and threw it in the water when the mullet was going up there. And there was about 200 mullet came up on their tails. And three of us were made to fillet them, cut them, and smoke them. And we spent about 2 days smoking and putting as a punishment for putting the dynamite in the water tube. But what I'm saying is the mullet used to travel right up the kaikokupu, up the whairere. They had that pathway. But if you put blocks or try to create new pathways, you've got to do it in such a way that the fish know about it. The eels know about it. And they know because they travel up there, and they see some strange area. Now, I have experience of that because I shore for about 35 years and I traveled all over the country. And there's the Kaituna River and Waihi are very similar to Lake Ellesmere, to Pirino down the Wairapa, and I see you had those named down. Right down to the Wairo down down right at the bottom of the South Island. They all have the same pattern. And the ones who kept the pattern like Lake Ellesmere, the eels are seasonally run there all the time. So I'm saying is, it's all right, the theory, but sometimes you got to have practice too, and the practice is you got to talk to stars in the fish.
So Maru is just indicating that tikanga Māori and matauranga Māori are part of this, and I saw they come up in your presentation too. I'm just Nikki.
Oh, morning.
Sorry, your hands up, Nikki. Yeah.
Yes, morning everybody. Kia ora, Peter. Thank you for that presentation. I think just my response probably isn't going to be as technical as Maru's, and thank you for that, Maru. But I was just thinking about, I imagine the DOC policy was developed at a time when it was considered that there were plenty of fish, that those earlier data that you shared around you know, an understanding that the fishery wasn't under threat. And so I imagine that, as you say, that policy is outdated and it's probably time to develop some new policy. And I think proposals like this push the boundaries against agencies who maybe need to step in and allow some space for innovation. So I think it would be great to think about how would a proposal like this that would test it, and I see you've got Cindy involved, and with the methods that you've developed and the mātauranga that Maru's just talked about, it feels to me like this is a perfect opportunity to push back against some of that possibly archaic policy and create some new opportunities for policy and methods moving forward. So yeah, I think as long as there's support for those three components from this group and obviously our tangata whenua, that it would be an exciting proposal to take forward. Kia ora.
Any other comments? Grant.
To clarify, Peter, DOC, that they're opposed to this, but they don't have the final say.
In this instance, no, they don't. It's the reality. They're concerned about hygiene in the process. They have unclarified concerns about the possibility of different DNA being involved with the localised things, which mostly seems a bit weird because in actual fact, all the whitebait go out to the ocean. They all mix from all over the place, and then they come back to wherever they come back to. Some of them do come back to the awa that they were born if they're not too far away from it. A whole lot of them just go to the nearest fresh water that's coming out with the spring floods. You can imagine these are very small fish when they first leave here, and they are very much at the whim of the currents. And so larvae that come out of the Kaituna could end up right up at the motu or whatever, because we've got the big guy that runs around the Bay of Plenty. Those whitebait are not going to swim all the way back from the motu to the Kaituna. Come back here. It's those whitebait that are out off there when the awas and flood that respond to that fresh water and come back in.
Kia ora, Peter. I only have one question, and it's in regards to the translocation of the kakapu. Do you know, are they coming from a particular place?
Which is that?
The kakapu that's been translocated into this project, do you know where they are coming from?
Well, we'd have to track that with Paul Decker because over time that has changed a little bit. And so, as I say, we'd have to check that with them. And I do realise that there is potentially problems with the kaupapa of shifting from one watershed to another and that sort of thing. But we are dealing with a species that regularly mixes in the moana before it comes back to the... So that mixing of the DNA is a every year thing. We can certainly get more info on that from Paul. He's really switched on guy on all of that. My feeling is that in actual fact, their whakapapa is in Warkworth for a fair few years now because they've been living in concrete tanks there for a long time.
Okay.
So where the initial DNA comes from, my understanding was it was from a few different places, but I don't know that specifically. But there's probably many generations now that have lived in a concrete tank and don't know where they whakapapa back to.
I think, Peter, all I'm really indicating is that from this, from Te Maru o Kaituna, I think there's support for this type of project. And just picking up on, I suppose, some of the points that Maru brought up was if we know where they're from, then tangata whenua can get involved because it's around that tikanga between where these fish are and how they're coming here, so that relationship can be built as well, just to strengthen this.
That's why I brought this here for the ahika to consider all of these components and see how we might or might not drive this thing forward. Essentially, if you say, nah, it's not a go, then it's dead in the water, basically. If you say it's all on, then we can progress the process.
We just have a couple more questions. I'll go with Jeff Rice first.
Peter, kia ora koutou, everyone. Peter, look, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. I love it because it's a bit of a trip down memory lane. And when I was a kid in those areas, trout fishing and catching kahawai, we used inanga, and they were there and literally in their hundreds of thousands. So that's one point. But getting back to the kokopu and Te Taru and Piki, you might have a memory for this, but when Tai Edu was still with us on those tokedo blocks, especially up in high, when you get up in the high up in the hills there, the kokopu creeks, I believe, run from and start to have their beginnings up in those areas. And I'm no expert, Pete, but that might be a place where some research might be able to be done, because Tai had his own view of what was coming out of those creeks, and he used to talk to me about it. So if you wanted to, I can arrange and make sure you could get access through the farming areas that we manage. And there are direct access straight down to the coast from that point, probably almost the shortest route for our people as they tracked down and moved in and out. So just a point, but on top of that, I love the corridor, love it, and I would support it, absolutely. Oh, and one other thing, Doc, if we have to, we'll pay a little visit to Doc if we have to change their minds about a couple of things. Because I think they've got it wrong. Kia ora.
Thank you, Jeff. Te Tiri.
Yeah, kia ora, Peter. Thanks for your presentation. I know that you've been wanting to present to the Wahupu or Waihi group, and we're still going through our own sort of formations there. But just on that particular note, the neighbouring catchment. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
All good.
Just on that note, very quickly, in the neighbouring catchment, the Waihi history and the Kaikokupu river that comes down through there, we are in the process of, with regional council and the Wahupu or Waihi conglomerate, which is a representation of about a half a dozen iwi hapu groups that have come together and got a contract with MFE on freshwater funding proposed, quite a significant contract. Where we're looking to clean up the Waihi estuary. Part of that is that we actually, in the process, were a co-purchaser of a portion of farm that was up for sale, and that incorporates 30-odd hectares that we are looking to plant as a wetland. So that's on our agenda. Pim can fill in the gaps if he's got time, but so we would welcome a conversation in this area, Peter, about the program that you're running as I guess an accompaniment to the work we're doing with the wetlands down there. So it's a significant wetland, 30 hectares that we're planting, and yeah, so it'll be interesting to hear from you. I know you've sent emails to me. I'm too busy to respond, but I will get back to you. So Pim, you want to say anything about that?
No, just to tautoko what you said, and yeah, let's find the right time to invite Peter to the next Wahapu meeting where there's some space.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up what Nikki has said as well, that, you know, I mean, this is the agencies like DOC and others, bless them, don't have the answers necessarily for this. They can actually be an impediment to moving forward. So in these particular cases with the Wahapu anyway, the iwi are taking the front line to move things along with some very, very good behind it. Professor Kuda Paul Burke is one of those experts in the space. So we're rolling, and look forward to working with these sorts of projects that you're talking about, Peter.
Thank you, Te Tari. Piki.
Kia ora, Peter, thanks very much for your presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Firstly, I just want to concur that the stock that they have up in Mahurangi is original brood stock that they probably now have fifth, sixth, seventh generation of inanga, and as you rightly say, it's a mix of different types of fish in there. So coming back to Maru's point in that perhaps transporting fish that have only ever known like a manufactured way of living. I'm not, that probably deserves a little bit more investigation to see how they'll actually go out in the wild, particularly with their relationship to the lunar cycles and so on. So that's something to consider. The other thing I wanted to I was really interested around the creating of the habitats that make the current stock, what's already in there, able to flourish, and whether we need to put additional ways of restricting overfishing that stock. It might be a way forward for us as well, at the same time as increasing the number of places that our inanga grow. And I guess, the last question I had for you was, in your new environments that you've been developing, did you see any return of coda in those spaces as well?
Only some, very small numbers. And there are a big part of the ponds is too salty a bottom for them, and they like the pretty hard bottom. And in the new habitat on the Pongakawa, we've created all the joining channels between the ponds. They have a bit of a rock bottom. And so there's a good chance that maybe either they'll come back naturally and or we can translocate some of them there as well. Now, we've got a huge study going on the kora in Lake Rotoiti, and so there's a lot known about those fish there, and it's a possibility that we could get some stock from there. I haven't actually broached that kaupapa yet, but I can't help feeling it should be an ongoing part of the discussion about how we can create habitat that includes the amount of them. Certainly, as far as all of the ikawai are concerned, they all readily move into this habitat. And so then it's just maybe just a matter of creating a bit more suitable habitat here and there, and we can liberate some coda as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we're tight on time, so I'm going to bring this to a bit of an end, this particular presentation. But thank you, Peter, for coming. We'll no doubt be in contact with you in the future, in the near future, I feel. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can I call... Yeah, Mark. Sorry, Mark. This is the Rangiuru Business Park update.
Kia ora tātou, ko Mark Ashman, tōku ingoa. This is my colleague Glenda. We're from Quayside, and we're just going to come and give you guys a little bit of an overview of the Ringaru Business Park. I'll split the presentation into two parts. The first part's just a bit of an overview in general of the park, and then with the second part's a little bit focused on the environmental factors. So just before I start though, I just want to say I found that really interesting, Peter, and I'm actually quite looking forward to having a catch up with you afterwards. So I've got a couple of ideas. How do I? So Quayside, some of you may know who we are, but this is just a quick little overview. We're 100% owned by the regional council, and effectively we're the investment arm. So the main part of our portfolio is the Port of Tauranga, and all our money goes back to regional council and offsets the rates. We're involved in a number of projects around the place, number of property portfolios, Ringaru Business Park, Port of Tauranga, various stocks and shares, private equity, Hua Kiwi, where we provide kiwi fruit development on whenua Māori. Number of things. The business park, so the Ringaru Business Park has been around for quite a while. It got zoned a long time ago. Got a little bit more around the history after the slide. And it was identified through smart growth a number of years ago as the region needed a lot more industrial land. So there's a lot going on in this slide, but basically I just wanted something to show that it's been around for a long time. It's been identified a long time ago, and it has got a long history. And it really kick-started a couple of years ago, following a little bit of investment from the PGF funding. Since then, we're well into it. Our interchange has started, which is going to connect the park to the TEL, and earthworks are underway. So the vision of Ringaru, we want a modern, high-quality, and vibrant and connected industrial development. And the location of it's quite important. It links into Rotorua, Whakatane, and the Eastern Bay of Plenty, and ties it back into Tauranga and the Port of Tauranga. Sorry. Yeah. So the business park itself, it's split up into 4 stages, and it's 148 hectares of industrial land. Quayside own the majority of stages 1 and 2, which are the green area and the pink area on the top right-hand side. And it's quite a large project, and we imagine the land development part of it, of our portion, and including some of the builds, will be about 2030. So it's a good 7-year project for us. So this is an artistic image, and this is what we're after. We're after sort of big box, architectural merit, lots of green landscaping, a lot of swales, a lot of planting, a lot of visual amenity. What you'll see there is no polluting activities. We don't want to be smokestacks or tyre yards and scrap metal merchants. We're after a good park, basically. So this leads me on to the second part of the presentation, which is the sort of more the wider environmental factors. I've split it up into 4, economic, social, environmental and cultural. The economic, obviously with a park like this, there's a lot of employment creation, particularly through the construction and the ongoing with the various businesses. So we're really trying to promote the park for regional growth, bringing businesses in from out of town, supporting the local, a lot of growth, trying to get jobs and employment. Social wellbeing, we're really trying to promote and incorporate into our design the work, live, play philosophy. We're tying all our cycleways into the TL, looking to tie back to Te Puke, multimodal transport with buses. The park's also well located next to a rail corridor, and we're really trying to promote that. We're looking at trying to get a lot of car parking off the roads, EV chargers, even looking at trying to get some lime scooters set up so we can. And the good part of the park is the location as well. It's going to hopefully promote a lot of the travel coming out of town from Papamoa and Tauranga against the traffic. So it should be nicely connected. Environmental wellbeing. I think a key thing for us is we haven't had any sales or tenants. We haven't got anyone locked in. You know, there's been a lot of talk about relocating a lot of the dirty industry from the Mount. That's not what's happening. We've got the same consenting environment as the Mount in Tauriko, so we can't. Any issues that are located on these places, we've got the same issues. So that's not the intent of it. Talked about the three waters a little bit here. So for water for the stage one, which is stage one of our lands, we're using the existing supply from Te Puke. We're going to create a couple of holding tanks, which will be by the interchange, and then the future stages will be coming through the Western Bay as well from the eastern network. There's been a little bit of talk about the water coming from the Wari, but that's not the case. Wastewater, we've got a rising main that's going to go back to Te Puke. We've been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years with Tapaweka. The initial consented alignment, there was a few issues. It was actually going over whenua Māori, going past the key swimming holes, and going pretty close to Urupā there as well. So we've done a whole realignment and avoided all those places, which has been a good outcome. We do have to cross both the Kaituna and the Waiari rivers. This is going to be, we're going to drill under, double sleeved, and we're staying out of the, going deep to stay out of the riverbed. We're also, due to the park, there's also an upgrade of the Te Puke wastewater treatment plant that Western Bay Council are running, but that is in line with the consent that they got quite a while ago. Stormwater. So I feel like this is quite a timely little slide after the last presentation we had. So part of our stormwater management for the park. Oh, did you want to? No. Part of the stormwater management for the park is basically we have to create a 50-hectare stormwater pond. There's been a lot of work over the last couple of years with regional council working out how this can happen. We've got all our ducks in a line now, and we're into the design stage, and it's been quite an exciting part. We're doing a lot of work with mana whenua, looking at how we can make the stormwater pond more of a wetlands repo for the area. We've got a lot of island areas there, and I think here in Peter, I'm quite looking forward to seeing how we can integrate a little bit more fish habitats in there as well. So the design's happening at the moment. We've got ecologists looking at that aspects, and we've been told that the improvement in the water quality that's going to be discharged from the pond is going to be better post-development than it is currently at the moment in the farming activities. Cultural wellbeing. So it's been quite a process over the last few years. We did find some koiwi on the site. I think it was last season, and we're looking to reintegrate these back into the site via either the stormwater wetlands area or back into the whenua Māori that's on the park. We're also doing a lot of work with Tapaweka and Maru around taking some of the excess soil off the park from the creation of the wetlands, providing it back to whenua Māori to try and recontour and create more economic and cultural opportunities out of that. Tapaweka is also setting up a nursery, looking to provide the plants back into the wetlands. We've also just engaged to do a little bit of a cultural master plan, looking at a holistic view, we don't want to just come at the last minute, have a couple of street signs. We want to try and tell the story of the area, or provide opportunities to tell the story of the area, and weave that into the design of the park. In employment, obviously, yeah, there's lots of construction activities going on, ongoing business operations. We've also, as part of the interchange project, $50 million bridge, we've also allocated a certain expenditure of that money has to go to Māori-owned businesses. Yeah, I sort of went through that pretty quick. I probably acknowledged you guys are a bit short of time, but yeah, if there's any questions.
Maru?
Yeah, first of all, I'll make a statement that the Rangiru Business Park, I see that as a hub to the regional and national economy because of the port of Tauranga, the logs that go through there. Sometimes we can get lost where capital value plays a higher role than social value, social, cultural, environmental value. And you talked about the 4 bottom lines, but I think that you need to give more consideration for the social capital, which is the social, cultural, and environmental, before placing your bricks and mortar that might be in the right place or the wrong place, which will create your economic capital. I just wanted to highlight those points, and it hasn't been quite clear on how you clarified those. If you've got any answers to that one.
Thank you, Maru. Te Taru?
Yeah, kia ora Mark, korua, te tima no Quayside. You look, just to note that I'm on the board of Quayside. I was an appointee from a regional council, been on since March last year, I think, lost a bit of time. And I was certainly part of making a connection to the mana whenua, to Tapuika in particular, and where we negotiated and navigated through an MOU that was signed off. And following that MOU, the Paipai of Tapuika, the Paipai of the Hapu, they were there and gave the blessing to, and held a particular event that I emceed at that time to, I guess, consecrate the start of the earthworks on Rangiru Park, and then now it's going full gather, and it's certainly at this stage had the support of Tapuika and the Hapu concerned. And the matters of sort of environmental, social, cultural, and economic are important factors in the way, as Mark has presented, and that are important considerations in this. We don't want to foul that up. We want to be true to the expectations of the mana whenua. I mean, in terms of employment, the expectations over time is 2,000 to 3,000 employment opportunities. It is midway between Tauranga, Whakatane, and Rotorua, so you know there's definitely sharing across the region. The issue around the focus on environmental matters, the planting of a wetland, significant wetlands in the space as well, as plus the greening that has been mentioned, is all important, plus the quality of the clients who go to build there, very, very important as well, so we don't suffer the indignities that the existing port has been facing with pollution issues and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a project that I certainly have supported around that board table. The other thing is too, with the discovery of Koiwi, when it was struck, immediately teams moved in. Anthropologist was brought on board. You know, conversations happened between the board, the Quayside and Tapuika, and agreement was made to relocate those particular koiwi on a temporary basis until such time as a fixed position is noted, and then they will be interned with the appropriate ceremonies. I just say this: when you discover koiwi on Māori land, or anywhere for that matter, it starts signalling, you know, almost a halt to the project. All credit to the partners that had agreed, and with a week of discovery of those, or pretty quickly thereafter, the project continued on. And discovery of koiwi, as I say, can actually hold up a project quite significantly, particularly when archaeologists are coming into that space. But there has been a very good relationship established between the archaeologists, Tapuika and Quayside in this particular respect, and will be ongoing as well. So I suppose as a board member of Quayside and someone who's pretty close to the cultural presence of that particular whenua and the implications of it for not only our people, but the community at large, very supportive of this particular project. And just as a comparison, the regional council did a tour of Tainui Regional Council, Waikato Regional Council, went down to visit Tuarapaki and Miraka, and what a wonderful scenario that is, seeing our people leading out, taking charge of their own development, and heading to the Ruakura park that Tainui is developing. And Quayside has an interest in that park as well. But but looking at what they're doing, what we're doing, quite excited about the opportunities that are arising around one, procurement of employment and opportunities for building capability for the mana whenua, for the hapu, the iwi, and for the community at large. So I just want to speak in support of what Mark has presented and offer, I guess, myself to any questions as well, should anyone have any.
Thank you, Te Taru, for that. Nikki, can we come to you, Nikki?
Oh, kia ora. Thanks for the presentation, Mark. Couple of things, just recently been intimately involved in some of the work being done in the RM reform process, and the positioning of Te Oranga o Te Taiao is kind of an overarching ethic in terms of how we think about management of natural resources moving forward. And I guess this is probably some of what we were trying to envisage, the development of or the changing of land use, thinking about the positioning of water, why in our whenua is central to any development. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge your thinking around wastewater, stormwater, and the supply of water to your development, both in the pre-development and post-development stages. So just wanted to acknowledge that. I think the second point I would make, though, is later on in the meeting, we're going to talk a little bit about allocation of water, allocation of discharge, and the fact that aspects of our parts of our rohe, in terms of the Kaituna River catchment, is over-allocated in terms of the water resources that we have, but also over-allocated in terms of the level of discharge that's allowed to be made into our waterways. So again, I guess it's just acknowledging that there are still some challenges to be met moving forward, and just, something to really think about as a community in terms of what we are going to enable across this catchment moving forward. Kia ora.
Yeah. Can I respond on that one just quickly? Mark, you talk first, mate. Sorry.
So obviously the discharge has always been a big part of our work. We've been working closely with council over the last couple of years with our looking at the historic consent and trying to tie that into climate change, and it's part of the reason why that pond, that wetland is so large. It's 50 hectares. It's a large catchment for a development, and that's literally just the main reason for that is to keep that discharge out into the Kaituna as low as possible, and it's at pre-development stages, so there's no increase, which is something we're quite proud of as well. Yeah.
Yeah, kia ora, just to add to your comments, Nikki. Obviously, Quayside is a CCO of Regional Council, so we own Quayside on behalf of the region, and so very close to the instruments of legislation that are required. We would be front and centre, and certainly making sure that those issues that you raise or potentially will be raised with us are addressed. Very much addressed. So I certainly note your comments, Nikki. They're well put, and I know that Quayside is under the eyeball of Regional Council as well in these particular areas. So I'm very hopeful that all of this will be worked through accordingly. Kia ora.
Thank you. Jeff, your hand's up.
Mark, can you guys still hear me?
You're a bit quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Look, tēnā koe, Mark. Look, thank you very much. You've been, look, I'm well aware that you've been talking with Tapuika, and I'm a Tapuika boy, and I just wanted to touch on the nursery. I've had a look at that project. Have Quayside given any consideration to the potential of also a shared access off that Par Road area into the industrial development. So access and egress. Just wanted to point that out. You know, from that end of the development, kind of makes sense to me. And I suppose I'm a little biased because it would be also of benefit to Tapwika and the other two main hapu, which are Ngāti Maru Kukere, as you've mentioned, but also Ngāti Kuri. So I hope you're writing that down. Maru Kukere, Ngāti Kuri. I also want to just let you know that it's time that perhaps we had a meeting with you, and I'm now putting my Te U o Te Waka o Te Aroa hat on. And I think we should have a catch up and bring ourselves up to date, you know, both the short, medium and long term. So perhaps I might ask somebody like somebody from Western Bay of Plenty District Council to contact you and arrange that. There are a couple of other things that I'd like to meet with you guys on too, and they're not just cultural, but they're also investment. I'm also very curious as to where your price range is going to sit, you know, per square meter when you start knocking off the industrial park to whoever might be interested, as it compares with Rotorua, Tauranga and Whakatane. I want to see where the synergies and the balance might be there for those areas, because it's all going to affect and it's all going to play a part. There's much more I'd like to talk to you about, mate, but not now. But so just making you aware that a guy called Jeff Rice is going to come and tap on your door. Okay, kia ora.
Kia ora, Jeff. True to form, straight to business. Yeah, awesome. Hey, we found ourselves at 11 o'clock, so we're going to break for a cup of tea, a bit of a break. Those of you at home, time to go and put the kettle on or something, but we will be back at 11:30.
Bring that forward.
Oh, I'll just bring what forward? Oh, okay. Let's play it safe and we'll come back at 11:20 rather than 11:30. Okay, thank you. Kia ora koutou, tahuki mai ki te tepu, back to the table and back to the agenda. Okay, verbal updates at 10.1, Chairperson's report. I don't have anything to report, so we'll move on from that. And so that's 10.2, Secretariat update. Jane? Thank you.
Kia ora, everybody. My original report in the agenda pack today was dated 27 January 2023, so you've actually had two opportunities to read it through two different agenda packs now, so I'm going to take the report as read. There are some things in here that have changed and need updating, and the first of that would be the symposium that was going to be held in April 2023. Unfortunately, while planning had started, we ended up having to postpone it due to Dean's ill health at the time. So we did manage to get some sponsorship from some of the councils involved, and we've just started pulling together a project team, but that's pretty much as far as we'd gotten. And of course, there's the planned itinerary for the 2-day event is in the paper. There's just a couple of other things that are coming up. The Rangataki River Forum meeting on the 2nd of June, they'll be looking at appointing a new chairperson. Bronco Carson has been replaced as the representative for Ngāti Whare, so just that to note. Also, a new co-governance committee has been formed. It's called the Tarawera Awa Restoration Strategy Group, and of course it's over the Tarawera River. It has 4 iwi, which is Ngāti Awa, Tuwhare Tōki Kawarau, Ngāti Rangitihi and Ngāti Mākeno, and it's come about through the Ngāti Rangitihi Treaty Settlement. The only other thing I wanted to mention is I am currently seeking some legal advice about creating a charitable trust to manage the funds on behalf of the iwi members to undertake environmental projects on the river. there could be some interest from the rangataiki as well, which is why it's taking me a little while to get everything lined up, because there are opportunities to save some money if we combine the two groups. But I'll be bringing a paper back from my legal counsel to Maru to make a decision in the future. That's basically my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Jane?
Yeah, Kura, how far have you gone, Te Taru here, how far have you gone to developing your legal entity? The only reason why I ask is that Wahapu have gone through a whole process of looking to develop a charitable trust entity after examining what options are available. We're some way down that pathway in terms of finalising what that entity would look like and all the instruments that go behind it. You know, if you, I mean, I suppose I'm saying if you want to, you know, for us to share some of that with you, that I think that would be quite appropriate, or you might be far enough advanced to just roll with it.
To you, Mr. Chair. Actually, not that far advanced. I've currently waiting a paper to come out on the 30th of the month, which is an options paper, which looking at what the risks will be for iwi members, you know, what it might look like, and possibly even a draft constitution. But a resolution will need to go through both committees before any further action is taken up after that.
Okay, okay, goodbye.
Mate.
Just a quick.
Was it for me? Sorry, the audio is not very good.
Oh, sorry, no, just
Sorry.
Mate Moana asking the question, then I'll come to you, Nikki. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm just asking the question of whether Jane has any idea when we likely to hold the symposium. Are we looking more like 2024 now?
Like 2025.
2025, thank you.
Nikki.
Comment.
Thanks.
Kia ora,
Jane.
Nikki.
Thanks, Dean. I guess I just had a thought rather than a question. A number of the iwi entities sitting around this table already hold charitable trust status in different forms, and I just wondered if any thought had been given to a way to enable or support each of one of the hapu and iwi to hold funds rather than set up our own, or whether that's one of the options in the options paper, or if that's been explored.
To you, Mr. Chair. I have explored it with not so much with the Te Maru or Kaituna iwi, but I have explored it with the Tarawera Awa committee, and their advice is they didn't actually want to join a charitable trust because they do have their own through Ngāti Rangitihi. So these will be discussions that we will need to have before anything is formalised.
Thank you. Oh,
Yeah, I
and
completely.
sorry, on the
Nikki.
sorry.
No, go, Nikki. Sorry.
Just one other
Nikki,
point
can you just finish your question?
Yeah, just one other point on the symposium, just to note that in 2024, there has been an offer for Te Aroha Lakes Trust to host the Te Wai Māori conference in Rotorua, so that might be an opportunity to maybe tono to Te Wai Māori to maybe share part of the agenda with Te Maru o Kaituna.
I think that would be quite a good idea and then that gives a kind of a view of what's happening within the wider rohe. So yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. Sorry, Maru.
Yeah, I completely endorse the idea of a charitable trust, providing it collaborates in a way that's customary rights, not property rights, because that's the problem that we have amongst each other, and so does councils. We got these navigation lines. They say that this is ours, but if you get together collectively, and if the deed is shaped that is based on customary rights as opposed to property rights, then I think it'll go a long way.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through discussions with legal so far, they're actually looking at basing the constitution on your river documents. This year, Council decided not to go through an annual plan process. I think next year will be the 10-year plan process. So it would be quite good to do a submission on behalf of Te Maru and the other co-governances if it's considered appropriate to continue with the Secretariat.
Comments? My comment is yes, we should make an application and we should continue with the Secretariat position as we move forward. Thank you. So can I have a mover? Well, I'll move the Secretariat. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Mate Moana. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We're above the clock, I think. Sorry, 9.3. Pim, thank you.
Ora koutou members. And as you'll know, this is the quarterly report on your action plan, Te Tini Atuna, with updates from each of the workstream leads associated with the 18 projects. It's a comprehensive template based on guidance given by yourselves a year and a half or so ago. And it's just need to acknowledge the work of Fiona Wood in drawing together all of those bits and pieces. So we're on page 33 of your agenda. I guess one difference in today's report is that there are a couple of recommendations associated with the status report that we'll need you to consider, and we'll get to that at the end. And the chairman has also asked whether we can add a fourth recommendation to this paper to provide some endorsement of Peter Ellery's proposal. So we'll get to that also at the end of this presentation. So I'll just briefly lead you through the projects because we are about a quarter of an hour ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. But feel free to interrupt me with questions as we go. So project 1, the Lowland Drains and Drainage Canal Improvement. So Jackson Efford has prepared this update. And it's probably a good opportunity for me to introduce members of Te Maru to Anna Dawson, who's a land management officer working in the Kaituna catchment. Anna's sitting down the back there next to Chris. So she and her colleagues are the ones that work with individual landowners on what we call environmental programs or directly on capital projects or other projects that the council does, either to meet its own objectives or to meet the shared objectives of council and Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority. So the second part of project 1 is around the upgrade of the Ford Road pump station. And unfortunately, neither Kathy Theolarden, the project manager, or Mark Townsend, the engineering manager, can be here. Chris, did you want to say anything about this particular project?
It's a project that those who attend the River Advisory Group, it was discussed there as well, and your chair, Dean, was there. Nick, and also our guest Barry in the back here is also a member of that. So it's about council wears two hats here, I suppose, in the co-governance forum that we're sitting in today, but also from a rivers and drainage point of view. We run a drainage scheme there, which helps with the regional economy, I guess, in terms of the farmers who rely on the pumping and the canals and that sort of thing in that scheme. So this is more to meet the requirements of that scheme, but at the same time to improve the environmental discharges that occur from that scheme, which are suboptimal at this point in time. So we're all seeking the same outcomes, I think, to have a cleaner environment. And this is one of the projects that's trying to get there. Unfortunately, when projects are delayed, you tend to get a cost increase, and that's what's happened here. So there have been some debates at the River Advisory Group about cost and increasing cost. The upshot of that was, let's just get on with it and get this job done before the costs increase anymore. So that's the space we're in at the moment. We want to improve the quality of the discharges into the Awa and into the Makatu estuary, or avoid discharges into the estuary if we can. So this is trying to get that happening as soon as possible. So I don't know if that answers any questions, but I'm happy to answer any if I can.
Thanks very much, Chris. Oh,
Maru.
Yeah, the impacts on the Makatu estuary. Go back in history, you find that the sedimentation, you were able to walk on top of the pippies. You've got to dig that far down to get to the pippies because of the sedimentation. And I noticed that when I returned to Makatu after about 30, 40 years, shearing all over the country, I saw that there was a drop in the sand dunes. The sand dunes had dropped, whereas the sedimentation used to flush out, flush in, flush out, and you had three channels in the Kaituna estuary, and where they call Otairangi, that's just there used to be about 23 fishing boats. That was one channel. Then they had a channel in the middle, and then had a channel on the other side. Those channels hardly exist now because of the sedimentation, and that sedimentation is having a big effect on the Makatu estuary. So it's about reviewing that historical account and making the adjustments that will accommodate that historical account.
Thank you. Jane.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I just note that it says that the proposed new pump station has been assessed as meeting the conditions of a permitted activity, which means that it won't be going through a consent process. Is there any, has any thought been given to still going ahead with calling for cultural impact assessments, even though it's a permitted activity?
I'd have to check up on that, Jane. I'm not sure.
I've got Nikki. Nikki. Yep.
Oh yeah, I was just so just so I make sure I'm clear, in summary, it's a new pump station that will deal with increased water volume that's been experienced in these drains, as well as improve the quality of the discharge into the Kaituna catchment. Is that what this pump station will do?
Yeah, so Pim's going to jump in here if I get this wrong, because I'm not involved in the project in a detailed manner. But yes, I understand we don't want the discharge at Ford Road to continue. I think everyone agrees with that, because otherwise it gets into the estuary. So we're wanting to look at moving it upstream to diagonal drain to that location and putting in a larger pump facility at that, so it takes the water from both. But in doing that, of course, we'll be looking at what options for treating the water before it enters the Awa. So that's what we're looking at the moment. And there are various options being discussed right now. Some of them I can't actually speak about because they're a bit too early to talk about and confidential, but in effect, maybe landowners in that area, but we are looking at, similar to previous speakers, to improving the area by planting and retiring areas and that sort of thing. But yeah, this the current work is saying from the ecologist is saying that they can meet the permitted activity rules. So I can look into that a bit further if the group would like me to. But that's where we are at the moment. I think there's still 2 consents needed though. It's just not the discharge consent.
Okay, there's a question, Grant.
Yeah, Chris, could you just clarify the project 1A, the drains rehabilitation program? You've got an annual budget of 35,000 from regional, I take it, and you've got 14 kilometres in total that's due to be rehabilitated. Does that mean you're doing about 1 kilometre per year?
Pim might have to get that one.
Yep. So through you, Mr. Chair, and sorry for putting you in the hot seat there, Chris, without adequate notice. But so I'll just answer the questions in order. So the question from Jane was whether there have been cultural impact assessments sought associated with the Ford Road pump station upgrade, and the answer is yes. I don't know, as at the latest status update, not all of those cultural impact assessment reports had been received. I know that the Tapawika one was still outstanding. I think that Ngāti Whakaue has put theirs in, and I'm not quite sure whether any others were sought or what the status of those ones is. Secondly, just in relation to the water quality at the estuary, Nikki, so with the discharge at its current location, almost all of the discharged water enters Te Awa o Ngā Toroirangi and flows across the pipi beds that were talked about before. At the proposed new location, it's less than 30%. So the majority of that somewhat paru water will end up going out at Te Tumu. And while there's no impact when it goes out to the ocean, there's definitely less impact on cultural and ecological values compared with it flowing through the estuary. So I see that as unequivocally positive. I guess the other details around that project, we probably do need Kathy or Mark to come and have a kōrero with us. Councillor Daly, your question about how much drain battering and improvement work is done per year. At the moment, that uptake of best practice drain management is a voluntary activity. So it's fair to say that the demand at the moment from landowners is reasonably high. And I think we've got nearly 2 kilometres planned for this current financial year. It's not super cheap, you've got to get in there and rebatter it, and it requires quite a bit of fence movement and planting, etc. And there's a comprehensive study underway on the Te Arawa farm to look at the difference in water quality and macroinvertebrate community index results associated with the implementation of best practice drain management compared with sort of the standard that has been in place for a number of years. Yep. I'll carry on through the report, Mr. Chair.
One question to Pim. There's a provision for user pay, and I just wonder if all the interested parties, have you got a shopping list of them, like farmers, Western Bay, Tauranga City Council, and all of them, because they're parties of interest, and so they should be helped foot the bill.
Yeah, I think so. Are you talking about the Ford Road pump station, or about all of the action plan projects?
All of the action plans.
Okay. Yep. I think there's a long list of funders involved with the different projects, from individual councils to iwi members to Te Wai Māori.
National policy statement, which involves government.
Yes, I think central government co-funding from MFE, MPI, and potentially others is all feeding into these projects in different ways. And it's the way that the action plan was set up. It said, here are the things that Te Maru o Kaituna would like to see happen. But obviously, Te Maru o Kaituna doesn't hold the purse strings for each of the lead agencies. So it's then up to the lead agencies or entities to say, yep, we accept that ARCO, we'll find the resources and put a team into action to make this happen. Or in some cases, as you'll see, there's a couple of projects that haven't yet been resourced and have not yet started. So Project 15, the Coastal Park Network, and Project 18, the River Restoration and Enhancement Fund, are two projects that have not yet started because they don't have the resources in place to do so. Does that make sense?
My reply to that is, it's like the Scotsman on the hill blowing his bagpipes. He who blows the bagpipes contributes.
Nikki.
I was just gonna, sorry, we went forward on to 1B, but going back to 1A, the last bullet point says development of a lowland drainage strategy would be useful to help prioritize work areas. Is that a work in progress, or is that something that we're looking to do more work on, or is it just a flag that that's something that would be useful for us to do?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I'll attempt an answer, and Chris can jump in if he wants to. But as you know, there are numerous teams within the Regional Council, and our colleagues in the Rivers and Drainage team manage the Kaituna Catchment Control Scheme and the assets on that to provide a level of service in terms of flood protection and drainage. Now we're working closely with them, and they are enthusiastic about the adoption of best practice drain management and other environmental improvements. But because the work that they do is 80% funded by targeted rates, and that ratepayer liaison group that Chris talked about guides council staff on how that money is collected and spent. There's currently, I guess, there's a fiscal limit on the extent to which the scheme contributes to environmental projects. Now we are looking through the long-term plan process that'll kick off. You know, that new long-term plan process will probably start in another couple of months, with drafts leading to public consultation, leading to a new LTP starting 1 July 2024. And I do think that, you know, based on the people we've got, the values that council has, and the new strategic framework that the regional council is in the process of finalising, that we will see more collaboration in that area, and a strategy around, you know, how do we maximise movement from the status quo to best practice drain management across the parts of the Lower Kaituna that are managed in that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that there will be work done on a strategy. I guess my comment to that would be, and we'll talk about it a bit later, so the plan change 5, the council have adopted the recommendation from the commissioners that best practice replace good practice in the policy. So that's helpful. That will help drive some of that. And then the second thing I would say is that while the purpose of the drainage and flooding protection group may not be to deliver environmental outcomes, I think the development of the new freshwater plan will drive some of that. So getting ahead of that through the long-term plan process would be helpful. So yes, I think you've answered the question, but those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Grant.
Just a quick follow-up. So you're suggesting that maybe during the long-term plan process, a greater contribution from the regional council wider pool of funds or could be put into the land rehabilitation program rather than just relying on the 80% of those who blow the bagpipes?
I think at the moment, the work is probably constrained more by the number of landowners willing to enter into a voluntary arrangement to make it happen than it is by resources. Because, you know, it does involve a little bit of land retirement and changed practices. So, you know, we are going into a plan change process to implement the NPS FM, and I think Joe will talk about that a little bit later in the agenda. That may, how shall we say this, make it a little bit less voluntary, in which case we'll see more uptake. And then the decision from council becomes, you know, to what extent does council continue to provide grant funding for activities which are required, if assuming it is required. If the Rotorua Plan Change 10 process is anything to go by, there will continue to be an active advisory and grants role for council, but that's a decision that council will need to take. Yeah.
Can we move on?
Yep. I can go through. I probably used up enough of my time, haven't I, Dean? So Jenny's nodding as well. I'll take the rest of the report as read. There's sections there on the consented takes and discharges, compliance. Anna's project 4, focus catchments with that map of landowner engagement across that low-lying plain. There's a section on farm environment plans, which refers to the conversation we just had. There's a brief update on the Kaituna River, Te Paika, and some of the other wetlands. Even a picture of the project that Peter Ellery came and talked to you about on page 55 of your agenda, Te Hauauri or Te Kawa, which was originally called the Burrow Pits, that inanga spawning habitat. So, kia ora, Dean.
I just want to kind of ask any of the members if any of these actions, there's anything that you'd like to ask questions about. Nick, you've raised your hand. Nikki, is your hand raised or is it from the previous? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Nick.
Just a quick update on Action 14, which is the Upper Gateway, so the upper area. So it's significantly moved on from there, and we've probably got at least another 10 to 15,000 plants in the ground plus pest trapping. And because of the work that's already been done, we've received a significant funding to carry on the work, which now means we can move out of the immediate area into the wider Okere Falls area and Otara Marae. So now we're starting to talk with the landowners in those areas about how and where we can plant on their land. And so that's been really exciting. So it was good to see that the Rotorua Trust could see the work that was done and then know that's a good space to keep working with us on. So that's been fantastic.
Might be a feature for the next year's thing in Rotorua with the Te Aroha Lakes Trust, a visit out there. Anyway, Nikki.
Thanks. I was looking at the consented takes and discharge part of the report, and I just had a question around, so the count, I assume, is the number of compliance monitoring actions taken as opposed to the total number of consents that require compliance monitoring. So I just wonder what the total number was so that we can get an understanding of the number of consents that are actually monitored in the catchment. And then and correct me if I've got that wrong. And then the second part of my, there's a question just around in the, you've got complying, low risk, moderate, significant. I'm just interested in where is particularly the offset one, where there's a 2% or one significant discharge compliance issue, the extent to which that is impacting. So if it's significant, I'm just interested to understand the level of significance that it has. So is it outside of the standard of the consent, or is it outside, is it having a more significant impact than even the consent conditions have tried to mitigate? The severity, I guess, of significant.
So through you, Mr. Chair, and I apologise, I'm not in the compliance team, okay. But correct your assumption about the number is the total number of compliance monitoring actions rather than the number of consents. In some cases, consents will have had more than one compliance monitoring action. In some cases, they will have had none. And there will also be compliance monitoring actions associated with permitted activities or, unconsented activities as well. So it's kind of a little bit complicated. The level of risk when they talk about low, moderate, or significant non-compliance. So low is typically like a technical non-compliance. Let's say someone has a consent and the consent requires an annual report with X, Y, and Z information, and that annual report is submitted a month late, or that's a low risk non-compliance. It doesn't really relate to an environmental effect, but it's technically a non-compliance. Moderate is when there's a technical non-compliance and there is some level of environmental effect, and significant non-compliance is when a consent condition or a permitted activity condition has not been complied with, and there is a corresponding significant actual or potential environmental effect associated with it. So when we get significant non-compliances, and there may be someone in the room from council better qualified than me to speak about this, but those are then referred to our enforcement decisions group to determine what pathway they go down, whether it's a prosecution or whether it's one of any number of intermediate steps that, abatement notice, enforcement order, infringement notice, formal warning, etc., etc. I will note that there have been 2 prosecutions taken by council associated with unpermitted water takes in the adjacent catchment just recently, which you may have noticed in the media.
Okay, just to say that I guess be good to get an understanding of how that's being dealt with moving forward, just understanding what's happening in the catchment and then how it's been addressed. Yeah. Updates, I suppose.
Can potentially ask one of our compliance team to come to the next meeting to speak to this project if you wish.
Ones that are insignificant.
Right.
Thank you.
Maru?
My understanding is to simplify it, and to simplify it is the affected parties, which is it's legal. There's a legal response to respond to an affected party, and there's a interested party. An interested party is damned if I do and damned if I don't. Providing you consult. If they consult, but say we'll take that into account, but we'll do what we like. But if you're an affected party, and if those affected parties would be treaty claimants, who has a legal act of decree that has to be responded to properly. It's those 2 areas basically, and I think that when we talked about paying the piper, that should include whatever council that's implicated in affected parties' decision, whether it's your Western Bay, Tauranga City Council, Regional Council. If they're hooked into being responsible to respond to an affected party, then they should be included at cost-wise and all. But a party of interest is just damned if I do, damned if I don't. We heard your concerns and feel sorry for you. That's it,
It's a blunt tool. Yeah, thank you, Maru. Just want to, so the recommendation is that we receive the report, notes the change in consenting strategy for Ford Road Pump Station Upgrade Project is detailed in Project 1B, agrees to reduce the frequency of full status reporting to February and August hui, and to achieve and to receive presentations on the selected projects as requested by Te Maru Kaituna at the May and the November hui. So those are the recommendations. Can I ask for a mover?
You're also going to add a 4th one.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, and we were going to add that 4th recommendation from after watching Peter's presentation. Do you have the wording, Jenny?
Through you, Chair, I can read that out.
Yes, please.
Recommendation 4 supports the translocation of giant kakapu into the Kaituna River catchment as proposed by Peter Ellery in his presentation to the authority at today's meeting to bolster the small existing population, and requests that Regional Council works with Peter on the planning and implementation of such a project.
Members, are we comfortable with that? Okay then. So that's the added recommendation. Can I have a mover? You'll move? Oh, okay. Nikki, move. Can I have a seconder? Mati Moana. Kia ora. Thank you. Next on the agenda is 9.4, freshwater hearing panel recommendation for a proposed change 5, Kaituna River to the Bay of Plenty Regional Policy Statement. This is Mr. Steed. Mr. Rolliston Steed. Kia ai mai.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. E mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa, ngā mema o te Maru o Kaituna. O te rā ki a koe e hoa moana, kua ruru atu nei koe. E mihi mahana ki a ia mō tana mahi i ngā rā o mua, mō tēnei kaupapa nera. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai anō tātou katoa. So really just this report gives an update that the freshwater hearing panel put their recommendations on submissions received in relation to change 5 to the regional policy statement, which is the change to embed the vision, objectives, desired outcomes of the Kaituna River document, Kaituna he taonga tuku iho, into the regional policy statement. And the council adopted the freshwater hearing panel's recommendations and has now notified its decisions. It's the first regional policy statement in New Zealand to go through the freshwater hearing panel freshwater planning process. The ability to make appeals is limited. Submitters can only appeal on points of law to the High Court and then to the Court of Appeal. Normally, in this process or equivalent processes, submitters would have the opportunity to make appeals to the Environment Court. So it'll be interesting to see whether we do get any appeals to the High Court. Give them 30 working days and then we'll know and we'll be able to report back to you, because if there aren't, then essentially change 5 is beyond appeal and the provisions will have legal effect, and it will just be a matter of making those provisions operative. And so, like with any policy change, whether it's a policy or plan change, Te Maru members and iwi in particular can utilise these provisions in support of their own actions or projects within the catchment, within the Kaituna catchment. So that's a good thing, and it's a milestone that the Te Maru might want to celebrate. And as I mentioned, also, it's been a year since the passing of Moana. Last Monday, Gorm, we celebrated and remembered her as teammates and acknowledged that she was a key part of this process in the earlier phases. So we miss our mate, and I just wanted to acknowledge her as well for the mahi that she did. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Kia ora.
Any comments from any of the members of the Maru? Nikki?
Kia ora. Thank you, Nessa, for the report. And yes, I just want to acknowledge Moana and her efforts to in particular work with the iwi members in terms of the appointment process for the commissioners. So I just want to acknowledge her efforts there, and also her work on the plan change. So yeah. And then just also to you, Dean, as the chair, thank you for making our submission to the commissioners and the points that you made around the future health and wellbeing of the awa. So just want to acknowledge your work on the plan change. And then the third thing I just wanted to acknowledge was the adopting of council by council of all of the recommendations made by the commissioners. There are a couple in there. I think I remember having some discussions at an earlier meeting about whether the use of good or best practice for our in that policy, and I see the council have adopted the recommendation around best practice, but also I think the other recommendation is the particular role and function of hapu and iwi in this policy, and the role that we play in ensuring the outcomes are achieved for the Kaituna River in partnership with our council. So just want to acknowledge the uptake of the recommendations from the commissioners by the council, and then we'll just see what happens moving forward. As necessary, we've got 30 days for any appeals, so just want to acknowledge the staff and all of the work that's gone into getting this policy change across the line, and the significance of it. So kia ora everybody.
Kia ora, Nikki, well said, well done, thank you. Grant?
Question, and Pim might have alluded me to this, but NASA, perhaps could you maybe give a bit more background on how significant it is that the Kaituna River document, Kaituna He Tonga Toku Iho, has been recognised in a regional policy statement such as this? And are there any precedents? How often, how has this happened before? And, what are the precedents?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there is a precedent in terms of the Rangataiki River document that was the first co-governance change to the regional policy statement in this region, in fact, New Zealand, that came out of treaty settlement legislation. And so that has its own chapter in the RPS, and that was the first change that came out of treaty co-governance settlement, that the vision, objective, desired outcomes were made operative in the regional policy statement. So this one will follow suit, and it now means that district and regional plans must give effect to its policy direction, or in other words, they must actively implement the provisions that are now in the regional policy statement for the Kaituna River catchment. So that has the strength of basically, if there's any provisions in plans, regional district plans, which are at odds or conflict with the policy in the regional policy statement, then the members or anyone else can challenge those and seek them being aligned. So that's moving forward. We're talking about any future changes and any reviews to existing plans. And also the fact that the Regional Council are currently going through an essential freshwater policy program process to give effect to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. There are several, 12 FM freshwater management units within the region. The Kaituna is one of those, and the Kaituna policy framework has a heavy focus on freshwater, and so now this forum can seek to ensure that these policies are given life through that process. The council staff are already going through the process of trying to ensure that the FMU story and the plan change provisions do implement the Kaituna bespoke policy framework. However, this forum has that policy framework to rely on for that plan change and any others that may occur. It's a long way of saying, answering your question, but anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, just on behalf of Te Maru, it's a good thing. It's been a long journey for all of us, we've all kind of sacrificed our own kind of things that we do in life, but I think we've recognised that this kaupapa is an important kaupapa. So, I mean, it's a big thank you to the board members of Te Maru who make up Te Maru, the members of Te Maru. Big mihi nui to ngā iwi for the river. I mean, these are things that we've spoken for all our lifetimes. Our uncles and previous spoke about protections around our taonga. And so a big mihi to all the iwi members and our intrinsic relationship we have with this waterway. Lastly, but certainly not the least, to all the staff within regional council and other councils that have helped work with us to achieve this. Has been amazing, and it's lovely to see some of those faces still here. Some have moved on, some have gone. So mihi nui moana. So a big acknowledgement to her. But you too, Nessa, you've been there right from the beginning with us and given us good advice. Apparently, no, supposedly. 30 days we'll see. But yeah, thank you, Nessa, for your work too. It's been amazing. Yeah. Any other questions for Nessa? Carl, thank you. We have, just as a reminder, sorry for the whānau who aren't here, but we do have a cake and something to celebrate this later on in the kai. But anyway, I'll just I'll have a mover to receive this report. Nick, and a seconder. Nikki, thank you. Uh, 9.4, Essential Water, Freshwater Policy Program. Kia ora, Joe. Joe is one of those faces we've seen for a long time from the inception of Te Maru, actually. Kia ora, Joe.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, for those who don't know me, there's a number of new members around the table, and of course we couldn't meet at our last hui. So my name is Jo Watts. I'm in the water policy team, and I was the policy planner alongside Anaru Verco that pulled together the river document around the wishes of Te Maru. So it's a great that we've got that change 5 in the document now. I also brought along Margaret Courtney. I don't know whether she takes over for Anaru. I'll let her introduce herself, but she's the new Anaru Verco.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Margaret Courtney ahau, no Rotorua ahau, he uri tēnei no tūharangi Ngāti Wāhi o Ngāti Whakaue Tapuaka Ngāti Umutahi. I've just started with the council in November of last year, previously with Te Puni Kōkiri, mainly doing whenua Māori, but have come over to the council, so first experience of local government and working in the freshwater policy. I sit within Te Omorangi, our Māori advisory group, but specifically working in freshwater. Kia ora koutou.
Is that working? Yeah. So I haven't got a presentation because actually I thought all the time would have been gobbled up by now. So I've just got a very brief paper in the agenda that talks about the engagement that we're doing in the freshwater space. We're right in the thick of the public engagement, the tangata whenua engagement on the freshwater kaupapa. As NASA talked about, we have 13 freshwater management units, and we have a book for each of those management units. So this is the Kaituna one. You guys were the first to get that. I made sure of that with the e-pānui. We sent the link through the region-wide booklet gives an overview, and this one's a Kaituna specific one. So for those of you in the room, you can have a hard copy one here. The little outline in the paper just talks to that and talks about the engagement that we're already underway. Part of our team went to the Saturday, 6th of May down at the Te Puke War Memorial, and there's some other dates there. yesterday and the day before we had our hui rohi. I'm not sure whether you want to mention that, how those went.
Yeah.
We've got our chairs of those groups within our midst.
So with our tangata whenua engagement, we've had 2 hui rohi this week, one in Rotorua at Te Ao Marama, and last night at Hunga Hunga Torua Marae. Our Māori councillors are hosting our hui rohi. Next Wednesday, we've got our one in Whakatane for Kohi, who's going to, and Arapita Tahana is going to facilitate that one, and then Councillor Iti will he'll host. But the format is more presentation style. A lot of the community engagement at the moment is more drop in and speak to different staff members about different issues that they want to address. But our one is for our tangata whenua, explaining, giving an overview of MPSFM, Te Mana o Te Wai, and then our journey as a council so far, where we've gotten in the last few years, and then what we need to do. We've also incorporated iwi presentations, so our audience can hear what iwi are doing across the rohe. Tangata whenua at different stages of their journey in the Wai Māori space. So we were trying to cater for people that were right at the beginning to sort of some of the iwi and hapua that are more along the journey. So on Tuesday we had Gina Mohi and Katarina Ridge, who spoke about the Ngāti Rangi Wiwihi story. And then last night we had Pia Bennett, who talked about Ko Waimato, who project that is being funded through MFE. So we've had good attendance, I think, so far, 20 to 30 odd people, which is encouraging. It's our first round of hui rohi, and our next lot will be in August. Kia ora.
I guess the key message from this paper is regional council is still keen to engage with tangata whenua at any point in the process, and we're trying really hard to get those in a very difficult time frame and a difficult space with lots on. And it just remains an open invitation for conversations and hui, trying to get a better understanding of that Te Mana o Te Wai, the Mahinga Kai and the Mātauranga. And so just the next steps here, I guess, are just inviting Te Maru to provide any advice and recommendations to Toi Moana throughout that freshwater policy process, whether that be in this engagement period from April to September or anywhere in the process. So just encourage members to encourage people to attend some of the hui rohi or the drop-in sessions, or touch base with either Marg or myself. Te Maru may want to hold a hui rohi themselves, or play a key role in facilitating. Any of those things are all possible.
Ready for questions, Joe? Yeah, okay. Te Taru?
Yeah, just to add to the conversation around the consultation with tangata whenua, I did chair, actually I facilitated as well, because our facilitator was not well, the hui yesterday in Rotorua. And I think the objective of having our Māori councillors chairing these things is to show that there is a governance to governance connection as well. And I think that's important, that a show from the councillors themselves, in this case, Māori constituency members, to our people out there, does help with the occasion, where operators can share information, but having some comfort that at the council level, we can answer some harder questions that might come across the floor. And there were one or two that came across the floor that only a councillor could answer. But I think importantly, last night or yesterday, there was about 30 people there. Some good questions, but I think what I really liked in the context of really showcasing Te Mana o Te Wai approaches, and in particular was the example given by Rangi Wewihi. I mean, they've been spending 10 or so years on this, had preempted all of this discussion around Te Mano Te Wai, laid it clearly on the table and had taken the lead on this, and actually in a position where they are really the key player and the key leader in the conversations around the water from their particular puna, their particular springs at Taniwha Springs there. And it was really quite remarkable how their experience had showcased what can be done on the issues that have been raised in the direction from the National Policy Statement of Freshwater Management. It was an exercise in application, and more probably in their case, what can other people do? Probably stay out of the way and let them get on with the job, because they've showcased how well they can do it and how cooperative they can be, but on their terms as well, but in a manner enhancing way where the communities can benefit and where their environmental protections are front and center, where their cultural values are front and center and can be seen in practice. So that's what was intriguing to me. So having examples like that when we're going out to speak to our people, where they are exemplars of what is possible, I think is a sort of a mover and shaking moment really in the presentations. Our presentations really are focused more at the higher level at this stage, trying to seek some overall sense from their own concepts from our people, but ultimately there's a lot of detail yet to come. And they've been invited to make personal connections, one-on-one connections, or call for a hui of their own if they've got enough interest around there, and the regional council will front, and our staff will front, and I think that's the process we're moving on going forward. And I think it's sort of organic. Our people are confronted with so many things right now. There are capacity issues to attend these things, where key people will come and it's sort of word of mouth from them going back to the people. But at some point, and I guess what the regional council are trying to do is to really strengthen in pragmatic ways that connection with our people, noting the capacity to attend a lot of these is sometimes not there, or often not there. Just my thoughts. It went quite well, my thought, yesterday. And yours is, you had yours too, Mati Moana, I think. Was it today or yesterday?
Yeah, kia ora. Yes, we had ours in Tauranga yesterday and last night. But I just want to come back to us, though, as Te Maru o Kaituna. I think it would be a valuable exercise if we actually had a session with part of the staff that are presenting these to our Māori communities. And why I say that is that we have a specific role to play under Te Maru o Kaituna. And I think while we have got the provisions of the RPS that empower what this committee wants to achieve, it will have impact as well, and positive impact, I think, in what council are looking to achieve in this round of consultation with tangata whenua. Because what is lacking at the moment, insofar as the role council has to play in really writing the rule book for the MPS-FM, is the detail around the very high level information that council currently holds that has been provided by tangata whenua and forums like this. So I think where the benefit will be in having staff come to have maybe it's a 2-hour workshop with the MPS staff that are on the road, is probably specifically around the iwi members that sit around this table, and how they, because what I found at the meeting is that we're going to have different layers of tangata whenua and where they currently sit in the space. And, you've got one end of the spectrum where you've got groups that could probably run with the process. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the others who are just needing as much help as they can to get into the space. So coming back to Te Maru o Kaituna, I think the value of this group is that it has that high-level overview already. But through the representatives that sit here, I think they will be able to provide council with some of the detail that's now being required to write the rule book. So it's I guess coming with their knowledge to provide some input that will assist council with where it needs to go. And I know a lot of it is around the mātauranga Māori, and some of the iwi reps may have a level of discomfort speaking on behalf of their hapu iwi around this table. And I guess I'm saying they don't have to say, well, this is what it is, but it may be able to guide council on how it starts to have that conversation with our hapu and iwi at that point. Because I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for council, is that the application of mātauranga Māori in that rule book. What does it look like from the perspective of the iwi? And I think that's a role that we can play as Te Maru in supporting both the iwi and giving guidance, strategic guidance back to the regional council. So.
I'll just go to Nikki first, eh? Hi, Nikki. Ko koe.
Thank you. I just want to tautoko Mati Moana's comments. The notes I wrote while I was reading the paper was around, I just want to acknowledge the work that the council staff have done in terms of setting out a process and a framework in terms of how the NOF, the National Objectives Framework, can be achieved. So starting with that, high level vision and then working right through to the target and limit setting process. So just want to acknowledge the process they've set out to achieve that. I think the piece that probably similar to Mati Moana that I'm struggling to see a little bit is the requirement by council to undertake active engagement. And so what does that actually mean? And I wonder also if Te Maru o Kaituna could play a particular role in encouraging and enabling that active engagement piece and participating in a workshop and being part of bringing some of the whānau, who are working across this really wide spectrum of freshwater management issues into this conversation. Certainly from a Rangiwiwahi perspective, as Te Taru has said, we've done a significant amount of work in this space, but we have 30, statutory acknowledgements over 13 waterways. Most of them are within the catchment of Te Maru o Kaituna. And so when we think about Awahau, when we think about Kai Tahuna, when we think about Te Waro Uri, that's just a part of the role that we play in terms of the freshwater space. So really keen to support the facilitation of a workshop with staff, including the members sitting at this table, and also really keen to have a conversation with council staff about the direct role that Rangiwiwahi can play in thinking about how the FMU can be informed by the work we might want to do over those other waterways. Kia ora.
Right. Maru.
Yeah, I'm referring to the new bill that's going before the House on the three waters. It's highly important that we as iwi groups get together with the regional council, because the regional policy statement is also going to change. And we need to be in line with those changes. In fact, it's an advantage for the regional council to collaborate with the iwi and make a one-stop submission to the bill that's before Parliament. That will be rushed through. There's no two ways about it. And that's in response to the three waters. So it's important that we submit to the bill before the House, and we need to do that collectively. And I go back to that point, always making that point about, it's not about property rights, it's about, from our point of view, it's from customary rights. We can argue amongst Ngāti Whakau and Ngāti Pīkeo, and we get all those arguments. But what brings us on the one wavelength is a funny thing, we all believe in Tāwhiri Mātea. So it's the lapse of the gods that links us together. So customary rights is highly important.
Peki, tō whakaaro mo tēnei mahi. Kei te mahi kotahi kei te tautoko te he ngā staff o Regional Council. Mo tō potai te Maru o Kaituna. Kei te pai?
Kei te pai tērā. Me tautoko ngā kaimahi katika. I te mea kai te kawea rātou wā mātou nā wawata, hi e kua roa nei mātou o te hiana. So absolutely, that's all our staff, technicians, and people within each of the councils and bodies are just executing our decision. And so why shouldn't we be supporting them? And there'll be opportunities there in those hui to articulate that, because quite easily our whānau can come at it and just look at it from what's been presented to them on the day. However, there's always been a lot of work gone into the thought and presentation and the ultimate decision where we've landed to present back to our whānau. So it's good to absolutely good to support our whānau, our hui by having the iwi, both the iwi and our councils there.
Kia ora, kia ora. Hey, Jeff, pehe whakaro. Pai tōni? Jeff.
Oh, yeah, no, look, I tautoko exactly what Piki has just said.
Okay, so I suppose, sorry. I'm just moving to a point where maybe, as Mati Moana originally brought up, that the Maru members of the Maru o Kaituna, I suppose those of us who represent iwi, that we have a session with staff around what our experiences are and how we might be able to move forward and ensure or support our own people to engage in this part. So that's all right. That's what I'm looking for, kind of an agreement around that. What we might do is have Jane facilitate that amongst us, and then we can have a bit of a hui and arrange. Joe, is that you, or who would we talk to? Okay, yeah.
Both, if you get a bit of an idea of an outline of, we can work that up on what you might like to facilitate and with whom. Then we can bring the appropriate staff. It might be a combination of our kaupapa Māori freshwater team, as well as some of, when you have a quick look at the story, like Nikki said, it's got some of the NOF stuff in here, which is the technical science stuff. So we can bring some of the scientists with you if you're into trying to delve into the detail of the groundwater and surface water and the quality stuff, as well as the kaupapa Māori stuff, so the cultural stuff, the mahinga kai, mātauranga, te mano te wai. We can shape that however Te Maru would like, that facilitation, and that just dovetails in really nicely. I've mentioned in section 4 of the paper there, your functions under your Tapaweka Settlement Act is where that 115 and 116 is this advice and recommendation. You can strongly advise, especially now that we have change 5 in the RPS. We know that, we were always giving effect to Te Maru's document because we knew that it would end up in the change. As like Nikki mentioned, there's some strengthening of the words in there, and from the recommendations, we're well aware of that. Staff will do our best to do that. You don't need to sort of tell us to do that. We're really on that page, but we need your support to strengthen that so that the community understand that we have a body like this that are leading the way, that are expecting change here. Now, when you look at the story, there's big change, and it's no surprise to Te Maru. There's really big change needed for the health of the estuary. bigger change than we can ever do in this first round of change. So the conversation in this book is how much change and what kind of indicators. And then the hard conversation is what do we do about it? And there's just a list in this book about some draft options, and they're quite scary. There's things in there about retiring people's farms and things. So the conversation is going to get pointier as we go along in our ones where we have a lot of change needed. So the Kaituna, the Waihi Estuary and the Rotorua Lakes are our problem childs because they have very sensitive receiving rights. So we can build whatever session you'd like, whether you wanted one with just the Te Maru members at start to flesh that out and then roll one out, facilitate that for a more broader community group, up to you, totally up to you.
We'll be in touch, Jane.
Ka pai.
Dean, if I can.
Oh, yeah.
Look, Jane's pretty much answered it, hasn't she? Really answered the question that was asked of me. I'm a little bit guilty of not attending, so for me it's long overdue anyway, and it's only time and being able to make these things work. But I think it's a great idea, particularly with that connect that we're starting to have through smart growth, etc. And as it's gravitating over towards the industrial park and all the development that's going to go on in that area, putting more pressure on, all our waterways, etc. Now's the time to get back into it and have a refresher course. So I absolutely support it.
Okay. Nikki, did you put your hand up again?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
okay.
I would be happy to host a hui, rangiwihi host a hui for the top end of for our end of the catchment, for Te Maru Kaituna workshop. So I'm happy to work with Jane this is my doing hat I'm putting on. Happy to work with Jane to set that up. Kia ora.
Thank you, Nikki. Te tai.
Yeah, look, would like to probably extend that opportunity with the Te Wahapu o Waihi members as well, which is Ngāti Mākino, Ngāti Whakahemo, Ngāti Pekeo, Ngāti Whakau and Tapuika. Same thing, sort of pull those engine rooms together and just sort of maximize the connection and ability to outstream from that point to its members and potential follow-up afterwards. Yep, happy to do that as well. Oh, I'll do that as I am the interim chair of the Wahapu o Waihi, so I'll pull it from that perspective.
So you'll talk to yourself?
I'll contact myself and then contact everybody else.
Yeah. Do you need your phone number?
Yeah, I use my phone often, so yeah, I will need it.
Come on.
I'll just go one.
Kumutu.
There was one thing of clarification. Maru was talking about the three waters and the submissions and collaboration there. Just want to make sure that we're really clear that our freshwater work is rolling on. The National Policy Statement for Freshwater implementation is rolling on regardless of the three waters reform and regardless of the resource management reform. So our understanding for the Minister is keep your foot down on the pedal. This is a really tight time frame and we just got to get on this train. It's left the station. So ka pai for your tōtoko about facilitation today.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. If I just can say one thing, I would implore the members to read the booklet that Joe has got and you've that she's going to hand around to you. That's one of the things I wish that we had given the opportunity to those attending our hui, the opportunity of having had them earlier and to read them before the presentation was made. And the reason I say that, there is a lot of deep dive information in those booklets that whānau were asking about, and had they had the opportunity to read that, that would have given them a broader scope of what's regional council, or the purpose of the regional council having these meetings. So yeah, I would just implore you to have a good read of those. They're excellent, I've got to say, are they? And just be ready for when the workshop comes around.
Our recommendation is that Te Maru o Kaituna, we receive the essential freshwater policy update. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Bill. Seconder? Oh, Andy. Okay, we're running a little bit behind the clock, but we're at 8.3. It's an update for Lawrence Oliver Park, wetland and Waiari bathing site. Am I reading that right? Bathing site? Okay. That's Jackson and Councillor Grant Daly.
Kia ora. O taua tukumonga, Kaituna tuku awa, no Papamaora hau, ko Jackson Efford Takuunga. I'm the principal advisor in the land management team here at the council, and just want to give you a quick update, and I'm on a tight time frame here to tell you about an exciting new project in Te Puke that is a collaborative project between a number of partners, including Western Bay of Plenty District Council, Tapaweka, Te Ara Kikatea Pathway Society, and possibly others to come on board. Next slide, please. Oh, can do it here. Cheers. So, does everyone know where Lawrence Oliver Park is? Have they heard of it? Near the cemetery in Te Puke, near the Waiari River, there's a park owned by Western Bay of Plenty District Council, and it's currently a paddock, but it has this excellent walkway around the outside, which Grant's group, the Te Ara Kikatea Pathway Society, has been developing. And the Western Bay of Plenty Reserves Management Plan has identified some possible land use changes there, including developing a wetland, creating an off-leash dog park area, and potentially a BMX track. There's also a regional council managed drain called Manners Drain that runs alongside the park. So here's the park and the Te Ara Kikatea Pathway Society track around the outside, and that's the regional council's manner drain through the middle. It's a very low-lying area, and in recent floods over the last couple of months, this is not uncommon to see that drain overtopping and filling that whole park with water, alluding to a more suitable land use of a wetland, probably, hence this project. You can see the amount of sediment and things left on the paddock afterwards, after the floodwaters have receded. The project would multi-purpose, but would involve creating some new habitat to create wetland biodiversity, possible areas for tuna, an opportunity for community education, retaining some floodwaters, and treating water as it moves through that catchment. And there's a number of these things obviously align with Te Tena. So this is a rough sketch of the proposed wetland at the northern end of the park. The water would flow in through the drain that runs in from the side of the urban area there, and during floods it would also overtop from the Manners Drain. And the wetland would be made up of a series of deep pools and shallow vegetated areas, like in this photo here at a different wetland that the council's been involved with building. And this gives the maximum treatment potential to improve water quality. And the council-owned drain through the middle is currently just a U-shaped drain with eroding banks, and we would propose to enhance that to a much more natural state by putting some meanders in it and rebettering the sides to be more gentle sloped with native planting, which has a range of benefits for wildlife and ecology and water. So we've currently secured a good commitment of support from Western Bay of Plenty District Council, and the council can contribute to the costs as well. We're engaged an engineer to help design the project. We've spoke with Tapueka representatives about some aspirations for the site. And if we can get all these ducks in a row, we'd hope to construct a new wetland there probably before Christmas or after Christmas this year. And I might hand over to Grant for this next part. Grant.
Actually, just before I talk about this, I'd just like to acknowledge the assistance from Pim and Jackson for this project. The project was approved in principle by Western Bay Planning District Council staff, Reserve Department, Peter Watson, and we wouldn't have got to this stage with the design work that Jackson has and Russell have put into this already without that support that actually initiated through this group. When I mentioned it as a possibility as a Western Bay update, and Pim immediately jumped on it, so thank you, Pim, for that, and Dean. We did actually receive $5,000 worth of funding from Council's Community Matching Fund towards the project, and we would anticipate applying to the Regional Environmental Enhancement Fund as well to assist with this, although the cost is significantly more than what we can achieve, so we'll be looking at some other funding avenues. But the Waiari stream, that where it passes under the Te Puke Highway, is a popular swimming spot for locals. They drive down there and they jump into the river. They used to jump off the bridge, but unfortunately the amount of sedimentation means that the water level has not as deep as it used to be, but it's still a very popular swimming hole in the summertime. Unfortunately, as you can see by that picture on the right, significant amount of erosion to the riverbank that was initially all running along a uniform line, and just the amount of people clambering up and down the banks has caused that erosion. So what we've suggested is, because this site is actually known as the Waiari Landing, this is where the Maru Waka used to come up the stream from the Kaituna to the Waiari and stop there to go into the town. Makahai Marae is probably a few hundred metres away up on the hill to the left, and the Te Puke Township to the right. So there's quite a lot of historical significance to this site, and we consider, if the riverbank is ever remediated, that a good option would be to put some gabion baskets and maybe add some a swimming platform to stop the ongoing erosion, but also make it easier for people to get in and out of the water, and also even launch kayaks and waka into the Waiari for their recreation use. So I guess we're asking maybe endorsement from Te Maru or Kaituna for this project, and we can look at maybe incorporating that when regional gets around to reinstating the riverbank.
All right. Yeah, the Waiari, that spot you showed where the bridge is, that is the landing. So in the earlier days before the roads went through, people from Tauranga would go around to up the Kaituna River to Kenana, and from Kenana they'd then catch a waka and then go up the Waiari and then into town. So that was the access way. And then so I apologise, because those were my ancestors charging £2 for a ride, which apparently was extraordinarily dear. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, yeah. Thank you. I mean, personally, I do support it, but I mean, you're bringing it to Te Maru, so I'll open it up to everyone else. So bihi mai ana.
Right-hand side of the Waiari, we own the landing. That's part of Otara, near the cemetery, this side of the cemetery, and that farm block. The farm block includes a pass site used to be Horoauahi. It's just on the brow. And that's just below the Horoauahi is the Waiari. And that's our land there. And our other land is on number 2 road. It all links together. I just wanted to say that we probably need to be kept in the loop. And you'll see that all in the Waitaha claim anyway, treaty claim. So that consultation needs to be, there's a hell of a lot of historical accounts that have been put together about that, that whole area. And part of that consultation needs to be with Waitaha, and in particular, us as landowners to that block.
Yeah, thank you, Maru. And you reminded me during the consultation phase for the wetland proposal, Peter Watson, directed that we needed to keep both local iwi in the loop. And our first meeting we had was with Tapuika Iwi Authority and Te Kapu o Waitaha. And they're both very supportive of that project. I must admit, we haven't presented the Waka landing proposal to the 2 iwi yet, but that's a very good point.
Way forward in the future, in the near future. I just remember that there was a supporting letter from Waitaha and Tapuika for this project, so I think you should have that on file somewhere. In regards to Te Maru, I mean, if it improves the rivers and those sorts of things, then it kind of falls within our scope. But I see Nikki's got her hand up, so I'll ask Nikki. Is your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say Jeff should go before me and then I'll go.
Oh, okay. Jeff. Mute. You're on mute, Jeff. Jeff, you're on mute.
Jeff, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Geez, I feel like an idiot when you've been talking 3 minutes to yourself. Look, what I was saying was that, I completely support your what you're saying, Grant. I think it's a great idea. I don't particularly care about who owns land where around that spot. It's about making sure that we've got create a nice, safe swimming hole for our kids, because you're not going to stop them from swimming there. And many of them will still keep jumping off the bridge too, Grant. It was a swimming hole in history right back to when I was a young fellow after rugby. Every Saturday morning, that's where we went. And for some of you who don't know, it's a stream that comes out of a spring, sort of, I think, about 7 or 8 kilometers up. It's always been the cleanest water in the country, and it's gone to a little bit to rack and ruin. So these efforts, I think, are a good idea. I think it is important to get the kids off the bridge if you can, because over the years we have actually lost kids and there have been children lost because they were jumping off the bridge and they got hit by vehicles. Dean, you might be aware of 1 or 2 of them over the years. But to have an area where they can literally go down and swim in a safer manner makes completely good sense to me. Utilizing it that way is fantastic. So go for it, Grant. I support it fully, absolutely.
Just make one comment. I mean to say, you can ignore us if you like. We're the landowners. You can ignore us if you like, but I'm no stranger to environmental courts.
Yeah, you're missing the point though, aren't you, Mother? I'm not saying you don't own the land. I'm just saying that what's important is creating some safety nets for our kids when they swim. That's all. That's where my focus is. You're going to end up in the courtroom. I couldn't give a damn, bro.
Thank you. Nikki, did you have something to add or something totally different?
No, I mean, just to say, looking at our 8 objectives, I think the project probably addresses about 4 of them. So I think just from my perspective, and the points already made by the members, it's something that I could give my support to, absolutely.
Thank you. Te Moana.
Kia ora. Just thanks to Grant and the team. I just want to, I guess, support what's been said by everyone that's commented this morning, but just maybe a word of advice with the presentations when they're made to us. Given the high representation of Māori in this group, I think what would be useful when you do these presentations is exactly what you alluded to, Grant, about your discussions with Tapuika and Waitaha, because that's absent from this and it's key. So, you know, while we acknowledge that it's great kaupapa, for a lot of us, it's having a sense of being able to support, given that we are aware that mana whenua have been discussed in there. So I think, you know, in future ones, if you can present that in these to show us that that's happening, and then I think it kind of alleviates some of the concerns of those mana whenua that make up this forum. Kia ora.
Final comment, and I was just reminded during the discussions, going back to the wetland proposal, and referencing Peter Ellery's earlier presentation, I think there's some lessons to be learned from Peter's findings with regards to our wetland, and I think maybe Jackson and Russell probably need to get together with Peter at some stage, maybe with a site meeting, because Peter raised some really good points regarding rocky bottoms versus sedimented bottoms in terms of habitat and biodiversity. And the question I asked him after the meeting was about the Kaikokupu conjunction of the 2 canals, and he made the point that the construction of that was as a result of everything he'd learned to date, and it was a bit different to the previous constructions, and brought everything together in a much more cohesive manner that produced the best results. And I think we need to have that discussion, but thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Jackson, for the presentation. So no doubt, I think if you have that meeting, include Waitaha and Tapuika to attend your meeting so that you can share that knowledge that you've just shared with us, with them. Kia ora tātou.
Yeah, just a comment. It's right. No, it's okay. All I want to say is that I support the presentation. Well done. And just on the matter of mana whenua, I guess we all accept that mana whenua connections are really important. That identity is important. But I also accept the fact that you know, we all rally around, irrespective. We rally around the taia and the obligation to make sure that what we've inherited is in terms of the taia, carries with it, you know, mana enhancing or mana depreciation. So I think we're all about mana enhancing. So when it comes down to the clean water and making sure that the taia is protected, I don't think there's disagreement in that space. Questions of who got mana whenua was always something that is highly regarded. But first and foremost, clean up the taia would be my view.
Thank you, Tato. Thank you, gentlemen. Apologies, Shad, you're running a bit late, but you're up now, mate. Okay, so this is the Crown commitment to upholding the treaty settlement arrangements and the new resource management system. Okay, so, ka hui ki a koe e hua.
Kia ora Dean, tātou katoa, kua hui tahi nei. Tēnei kamihi atu nei, kia koutou me ki rai ngā kaimahi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody, just before we start, I realise that I'm still on the agenda on the terms of reference, I think, as a member. What I have done is kind of stepped aside from the committee as a commissioner, and Bill's here to represent Tauranga City Council, because I do wear a couple of hats, and one of those hats is leading some of the Crown engagement on reforms, and in particular the upholding treaty settlement, and what that means for our PSGEs, and in particular Te Maru o Kaituna. So I just wanted to kind of make those comments first. And so just for the time being, in terms of this role, I'll be stepping aside from Te Maru and also from the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group. At the moment, myself and Rohario Murray, who's on screen, are managing about 18 PSGEs across the Bay of Plenty and into the Waikato, which includes the majority of the Te Arawa PSGEs and also Tauranga Moana. Anyway, I'll just kind of make those opening comments. And just introduce Rohario, who's on screen, David Haynes, who's one of our officials from Ministry for the Environment, and also Isabella Wilson. They're just really here to kind of observe and take notes and make sure we capture everything. So you'd all be aware that the Crown introduced legislation toward the end of last year, looking at reforming the resource management system, which included the repeal of the RMA and the introduction of two new bills, the Natural Inbuilt Environment Act, and also the Spatial Planning Act, and the Climate Adaptation Act will be the next cab off the rank, hopefully before the election later in the year. The focus of the legislation, particularly for Māori, was about giving Māori a stronger role from a decision-making point of view, but also from a participation point of view. So stronger role for Māori in terms of governance. There's a revision in terms of the treaty clause. At the moment in the RMA Section 8 says to take into account the principles of the treaty. The new proposal is that those performing functions will have to give effect to the principles of Te Tiriti. At the heart of the new legislation is the concept Te Oranga Te Taiao, which reflects a universal value about how we all need to value the environment, both Māori and non-Māori, and putting that at the heart in terms of our decision making. There's also a proposal in there around monitoring the performance of those performing functions, so the Crown and local authorities. And there's also a proposal around a new national planning framework, which the Crown's consulting on at the moment. And that is to be notified around the same time as the bills are enacted. So that just kind of sets the context for the legislation and what's been proposed. When you look at the RMA, you've got national directions. So here in the conversations about NPS-FM, there's a whole suite of national directions that have been set by the Crown in the current system. They direct everything through the system in terms of regional policy statements, the coastal policy statement right through to regional plans and district plans, then ultimately on to consenting. When you look across in terms of the future system, the national planning framework will set that national direction, pulling together all of those various planning instruments into one document. That'll drive through in terms of regional spatial planning and then NBA plans and then on to consenting. In terms of plan making, in the current system, we have a regional policy statement, we have regional plans, and we have district plans. In the new system, we'll have essentially two plans, a regional spatial strategy and a NBA plan. And that'll be set across the whole region. And these functions will fall to a proposed regional planning committee. And you can see on the left there, just in that diagram, just trying to illustrate how the new system will work in terms of the national planning framework, regional spatial strategies, NBA plans, consenting, through to compliance monitoring and enforcement. And wrapped around that are the objectives and the outcomes set out in the new legislation. Okay, so that just kind of sets the context of the reforms. I suppose what I really wanted to bring to your attention is that the Crown have made commitments to upholding treaty settlements in the new system. When you look across the RMA, treaty settlements in particular, there are over 70 across the country, and nearly all of them have some RMA provisions in them. You have statutory acknowledgements and you have collective arrangements. Te Maru o Kaituna is a collective arrangement. Sorry, Dewi, I think your mic's on. Are you able to mute, Dewi? Oh, yeah, cool, thanks. So the Crown had made commitments in the bills themselves. In Schedule 2, there are commitments where the Crown have indicated they will uphold those commitments. They were agreements reached between the Crown, between iwi, PSGEs and the Crown. And so there are obligations on the Crown to maintain those. And so our role, or my role, and that of Urohario, is to assist the PSGEs with that transition. I'll just flick on to the next slide. So in the current system, we have the Te Maru o Kaituna. There is the Kaituna River document. And councils have to, and just hearing from NASA this morning, those performing functions have to recognise and provide for it in terms of its planning. And yeah, so those are the current functions. And also the obligation, well, a opportunity to appoint commissioners, and Te Maru o Kaituna have done that for change 8. So that's currently how it's been applied and what's happened, and the committee has a role in that. In the new system, none of that is to change in terms of the purpose, function, and powers of Te Maru o Kaituna. That was set out in the legislation and in the deeds. So the functioning of Te Maru in terms of its purpose and those powers set out in the treaty settlement arrangements, the intention is that those things will remain. What the new legislation will require, though, is that the final decision, so as NASA indicated today, that the Council in Plan Change 5 adopted the recommendations of the panel and how the decision making flows through, that will continue, but ultimately it will be through to the Regional Planning Committee, not to Regional Council. And that committee will be made up of representatives from the local authorities themselves and also Māori. The Regional Planning Committee will have responsibility to prepare and develop the regional spatial strategy and also the NBA plans, and have obligations to recognise and provide for the strategy document prepared by Te Maru o Kaituna. The appointment of commissioners, that'll stay the same as well. So just diagrammatically, looking at what that looks like, ultimately on the right-hand side, the new Regional Planning Committee will have a relationship with Te Maru o Kaituna. The Regional Planning Committee will make the ultimate decision when it comes to how it will recognise and provide for Te Maru o Kaituna. In terms of what's required, we have been talking to PSGEs over the last 12 months or so, just signalling where things are heading, even prior to the introduction of the bills, from all of the policy work and the work that has been done previously. I'm signalling that this is the direction that the Crown is heading. And now that we've got legislation introduced, we need to step through this process. In the bills as well, it does signal that the Crown will provide support and resourcing to PSGEs to assist them in this process. And then ultimately, because these arrangements sit in treaty settlement legislation, there will need to be amendments to deeds and to legislation. The Crown can't impose these changes on PSGEs, so we are mindful that we need to work together to enable these things to happen. If things don't happen, then in the deeds, in the legislation themselves, everything still falls back to the intent under the RMA. We've got until in the bills themselves, it indicates that the Crown's got 18 months to work through this transition process with PSGEs from enactment, but that's right through to pulling together omnibus legislation to enable the changes to be made. In reality, we've probably got through till early to mid next year to work through these changes with PSGEs. It's a big task. There's 70 odd settlements across the country. There's teams of people working on this, and it's my role, along with Ruahario, to assist the PSGEs through the transition process. And I've just indicated, I suppose, what the next steps are. Amendments will be required to the Tapuika Claims Settlement Act, and we have signalled that with the PSGEs. Ultimately, we need agreement from all parties in order for the Crown to step this through. And that's it. That's just a quick overview, quick and fast. We thought it would be useful to bring this to the committee. We have been talking to PSGEs for the last 12 months. And so I thought it'd be useful to bring this conversation to the committee. Happy to take questions.
Maru?
Yeah, I've sort of got the general picture of the changes taking place and having understanding of the bills through Parliament and the rest of it. But there'll probably be some bun fights when it comes to negotiating, altering PSGs or changing PSGs. They obviously need funding for that. But how are you going to prioritise those fundings? What part of your structure are you going to prioritise fundings to do that?
So when we started this process, we've essentially released 2 tranches of funding. We are mindful in terms of the pressure, the commitment on PSGEs in terms of engaging in this process. In terms of resource, if there is a requirement for additional resource, we do need to take that back to the organisation, but ultimately through to ministers as well. There is still a long way to go in terms of progressing this. Ultimately, the Crown's reforming the system, and there's an obligation on the Crown to assist PSGEs in this process.
I view some of the utilities could be presented by having a fair understanding of the members themselves, of what their claim is about. I'm talking about statutory rights, statutory there'll be some altering to those adjustments made to those. But the movers and shakers have to understand their own documents and understand their own documents actually to make an argument of it or an agreement. So it's about supplying those resources for the changes, if you like.
Thank you, Maru. We have a question from Nikki. Shad.
Kia ora team, kia ora Shad, Rohario, Isabella, David, Dewi, Harmony. Ngāti Rangiwihi is a member of Te Maru o Kaituna, made a oral submission to the panel as they came around a couple of months ago. And I guess the couple of points that we made with respect to Te Maru o Kaituna was in particular that slide you showed, shared around the relationship between the Regional Planning Committee and Te Maru o Kaituna. So my read of the bill is that the right of reply, I guess, to the Regional Planning Committee is held by council, and your diagram shows that we would have a direct relationship. Now, my understanding is that would be through an engagement agreement, but are you suggesting that instead of council being having that role of having a direct relationship with the Regional Planning Committee, that would come to Te Maru o Kaituna? Is that a change to what's proposed in the bill?
No, so that'll be a relationship agreement between Te Maru o Kaituna and the Regional Planning Committee.
Okay, and so we oppose that position in our submission, Rangiwihi's submission. We believe that the Regional Planning Committee should have a direct relationship with Te Maru o Kaituna. That's the intent. The co-management arrangement with the council and Te Maru put us together in that process rather than separating us. So I think that that was the position that we took. And then the second point we made just around Te Maru was I guess wanting to see, and this is probably in relation to Rangiwihi as well, is wanting to see the bill completed and the content of the bill based on the report from the Select Committee before we would enter into discussions around whether or not our Settlement Act should change, and have it in direct response to the Act once it was enacted, rather than in response to a bill that hasn't been enacted yet, because there's still an opportunity for change to that bill. So those are probably just the two comments. There are broader ones, but they're probably not for this table. Kia ora.
Thanks, Nikki.
Te tari.
Yeah, kia ora Shad, koutou ngā tīma tautoko. Hey, look, yeah, just following on from what Nikki is saying, my question really was in the context of changes to the treaty agreements or settlement agreements. Fundamental to that is ensuring that there's no disadvantages for the existing agreements. I mean, that needs to be shown very clearly. There are some issues as Nikki has brought up that need to be resolved, but fundamentally, I think there'll be real difficulties if, in fact, the entities concerned are going to see some significant disadvantages or things that are detrimental to the original intent of their treaty agreements. So I'm assuming, that's front and center of the mind of the team working on this at the moment.
Yep. Kia ora, Te Taru, thank you for those comments. I think we are mindful. I mean, we are mindful of the intent when Te Maru was developed and negotiated with the Crown. Not just the words that we currently have in deeds and in the legislation, but actually what was the intent. There's the integrity that sits within the treaty settlement, and then there's the effect. So we are mindful of those elements.
Bill?
Rosh, just a process question. In terms, you reference the omnibus legislation, which might be in about 18 months' time, and presumably that relates to any potential changes to the settlement legislation. Does that also then involve potential changes to the Spatial Planning Act and the NBA in terms of what might?
I don't have any visibility on that, potentially. You've been around a long time. I suppose thinking back to 1991, there were probably a whole lot of things that unintended issues that arose during the when the RMA came into force. So I'm sure there'll be some things that will probably be picked up, process things. There will be some things I think that may need to adjust and change.
Kia ora, Shad. Yeah, I guess at the moment there'll probably be more questions than answers to what you've laid before us. And I guess the question that I would pose is, Te Maru was established through the Tapawika settlement, but since the settlement, it has traversed to another space. And it's the space that raises concern with me around the relationship it will now start to have with the regional committee. So I guess my question, in the relationship that will take place with the regional committee, what happens to the relationship that it's formed with the TLAs and the regional councils around its action plans that it has developed out of the statutory document that it's created? What happens to those, and where do the iwi sit in the scheme of things as to how they have traversed from a settlement process to now an implementation process?
So my understanding is, I acknowledge that the starting point for where you are today is not the legislation. So the Crown's made these commitments to upholding treaty settlements. If upholding treaty settlements was the words in the deeds and in the Act, we would be taking a step back. Actually, the starting point is where you are at the moment. My understanding in terms of how those things will be maintained is essentially through those relationship agreements between this committee and the new committee. The joint committee. So how you frame that and what that looks like is still yet to be determined, but that's the relationship is between Te Maru Kaituna and the joint committee. The intent is not to restart everything. Actually, the starting point is actually from where we are today. I take the point. How do we maintain that moving forward without risk losing momentum, without risk losing progress that this committee's already made?
So is there an expectation when the iwi forms a relationship with the regional committee, it maintains also the relationship that it's had with the TLAs and regional councils? Or is that another party outside of the relationship of the iwi and the regional committee?
I'm not across that. I mean, the focus of, I suppose, our work is really on how we uphold these treaty settlement arrangements. For iwi themselves, who may not be settled, or hapu, I'm not clear on what that looks like moving forward in terms of the new system.
As part of the Te Maru submission to this, we did indicate the level of management role. So we know we're governance and that sort of thing, but just picking up on what Mati Moana is saying, we've built it to a point where we now have a 10-year plan, we have actions and those sorts of things. And so I suppose it's about that. We don't want to lose that ability. I see Jeff has his another question. Jeff?
Tēnā koe, Shad. I guess for me, you know, listening to some of the commentary that's been made to date, it's about we can't lose sight of the integrity of the claim and its purpose and what was trying to be achieved. And for me, it is about toku toru, and that's where the claim sat with Tapuika, Rangi Wewehi, and Rangi Te Aorere. And the outcome was really, in many ways, in 2013, when we shook hands with the minister, he gave us all of that wetland, and then we shook hands again and we gave it back to him under a management process. And here we are with Te Maru o Te Kaituna. And it started really with toku toru, and it's been built and developed since then. So I know it's become another beast, but to some degree, I'm in Maru's corner too. If we're going to be assured, and we need to know for sure that there aren't going to be some fundamental changes to the integrity of the claim, then that will require resources and time and effort. You know, we spent 7 years getting to this point now, and I'm just a little bit concerned that we're going to create another beast that kind of loses sight of what this was all about. So those are the things that concern me, and I just want to be sure that that doesn't happen, or at least if we are going to look at call it a review or whatever you like, that we create something that's better and is more enduring and more enabling. That's also I guess kia tūpato ai, you know, we need to tread with care about this baby. And we're not unaware too that we've got to change, and we could have a whole different government whacking around the corner, and who knows where it might go from there. That's only 140 odd days away. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thanks, Jeff.
There are no other questions of shared. Just like to thank you for coming along and giving us this update. Probably need to be kept in the loop around a lot of this, and also the other members of the ministry who have joined us today. I think what we could appreciate is being kept in the loop and working through this. I suppose if there's any red herrings, we'd like to know about them early.
I think just to make a final comment, so the arrangements for Te Maru o Kaituna are pretty much the same as what we've got for the Rangataki River Forum and what's been proposed for the Tauranga Moana framework as well. So the intent is to uphold essentially what we've got today in the new system. So that's what we're trying to work towards, that the current plan, strategy, and the implementation side of it is maintained in the new system. It's just how we do that to give you and PSG's confidence that what we've said is going to follow through. So there's a bit of work for us to do.
One comment in terms of the political pitch. I think that every political party needs to know that if they alter our treaty settlements, we're all off to court. Now, they can play their political party game out there, but if we can't, if our treaty settlements are going to be altered, then we're off to court. It doesn't matter which political party goes into power. Every political party needs to be reminded of that.
Thank you, Maru.
Kia ora, Maru. We won't be changing anybody's legislation without them agreeing to it first.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't pick up that any change was happening. But I suppose what we're trying to maintain is the kinaki, the taste of the food. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again, and all the staff from who are present with us online here. Thank you for coming along. Just moving on quickly, there's no other agenda items for consideration, and that brings our hui to an end. So we're going to have a kai over there. But Piki, could I ask if you could bless us with a karakia prayer to end this hui that's been very informational and very heavy, but good. Some good outcomes have come from today. So e mi mai ana ki a koe ke te kapia ka mātou hui. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe te notira ia ki a tātou katoa. Uno kei te huri atu ki a rātou koriro ki te pō. Kia hoki mahara tātou i te take i hunuku tēnei hui i te rātu marama i te rironga o tō tātou nei whae a pūnohu. Koe a tērā i tūhono atu rā ki tōna whae aipo. No reira rāua o tira i a rātou ki a rātou ko tātou nei te ongora ki a tātou katoa. No reira i runga i te rā tuahuatanga me huria no tātou ki tō tātou nei kaihanga. No reira minu i tātou. Kia tau i ho mai rā ngā manakitanga te wahingaro kirimi a tātou. I a tātou e hoki atu nā ki o tātou nei kāinga maha. Tēnei anō rā te tīnua nei ki a koe i hoa ki a manaki pai wa tātou nei whānau. I a rātou e kawe nei ngā tuahuatanga o tēnei au huriuri. E inui tēnei nā mātou punanga moa ke āki tonu atu. Āmine. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora.